Hello guys, this is the Immortal in Marvel. Hope you enjoy. Do not forget to support the original author Overlord 1103. Chapter 1. In a dark room of a lab, the tooth-sickening sound of metal rubbing could be heard. Two strong men in guard uniforms pushed open an iron door. They dragged a hospital bed and walked into the room. On the hospital bed lay a teenager of Asian ethnicity. His hands and feet were tightly bound by leather buckles. He could hardly move his body at all. He could barely turn his head to look at the surroundings. The room was dark and narrow, with an operating table in the middle, and a light hanging down from the roof above it. Judging from the dirty curtain and the rusty operating lamp above the head, it is obvious that this place is not up to the standard that a hospital's operating room should have. There was even a faint smell of blood. Besides the operating table stood a man wearing a white coat. He was fiddling with some medical instruments as if preparing for something. No seeing the person, Derek, who was lying on the bed, his mood suddenly got bad. Faced with guards who were much stronger than himself, Derek had no strength to resist. He was lifted and thrown hard onto the operating table, lying flat on the table like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. "Welcome back, little mouse." The man in the white coat turned around and stared at Derek with indifferent eyes. "I'll ask the same question. Why did you appear in our research institute? Our security, including the CCTV, didn't find you. How did you do it? ... Derek didn't know how to answer any of these questions at all. How can things such as transmigration be easily revealed to others, especially the man in front of him who claims to be Ajax? Derek knew very well in his heart that the name Ajax was fundamentally fake, a fabricated false identity. If he remembers it correctly, this guy should be called Francis. The place where Derek is now is the research institute where Deadpool volunteered to become a guinea pig to treat his cancer. As a transmigrator, Derek has been in this world for just a little more than 2 months. Compared with those strange ways of traversing, Derek's process can be said to be very simple. Just after a moment of trance, Derek, who was playing video games at his home after a hard day at work, appeared in this mysterious research institute inexplicably. Derek, who hadn't figured out the situation he was in at that time, was spotted by the patrolling guards and knocked unconscious. When Derek woke up, he found himself lying on the operating table, being injected with some kind of medicine by a man in a white coat. There was no room for resistance during the whole process. The leather buckles were really strong. What greeted Derek afterwards were series of brutal interrogations and torture. Getting beaten with iron rods, drowning, suffocating, enduring high temperatures, getting soaked in ice water. Derek couldn't remember how many times he had survived that abuse. If things don't improve, he would start losing his mind. Every once in a while, Derek would be sent into this operating room by the guards. And here, he would always be greeted by Francis, a perverted sadist. Francis tortured him in different ways each time, and its intensity gradually increased. It increased until Derek's body couldn't bear the load anymore, or he passed out. These tortures made him feel like dying would be better than continuing. But whenever he would try to kill himself, he would later open his eyes, still alive, being forced to bear another round of torture for trying to kill himself. Over and over and over and over again. Derek wants to get out of this lab. He wants to see the sun again. But he knows what will happen. He knows the future. And he knows very well that if he answers any questions that Francis asks, his days might start getting much worse. Moreover, he was not the only unlucky guy being tortured here. All the patients in this lab were actually experimental subjects who had lost their freedom like him. The painful experience these days made Derek understand one thing thoroughly. The only way to stop this torture now is not even death, it is to escape this lab. After waiting for a while, Francis figured that Derek still had no intention of answering. Francis's eyes showed a trace of coldness. "It seems that you still don't intend to tell the truth. It's okay. We have all time in the world. I'll make you talk," Francis said. His fingers trailed slowly down Derek's cheek, leaving a cold, clammy trail in his wake. Francis pushed some needles connected to some wires next to him in front of Derek. His fingers were stained with some unknown liquid, and he began to spread it evenly on Derek's temples. As if wanting to crush Derek's mentality, Francis said slowly while fiddling with Derek, "In the next few days, your body will be continuously connected to some current. But you can rest assured that this voltage will not kill you. It will only make you feel a little pain and uncomfortable. Looking at the metal needles in Francis's hands, Derek's heart skipped a beat. Wait, Derek spoke up. Forced by the oppressive atmosphere, Derek finally spoke. Seeing this, Francis immediately thought that his method had worked. He looked down at Derek and said with a sneer, "I'll give you one last chance to tell me. Who are you?" "I am." Derek's mind was running wildly. He definitely couldn't tell the truth, so his mind was trying to make an identity. Derek had no choice but to bite the bullet and said, "Yes, it's I am." "It's actually quite complicated." Francis frowned. It sounded like Derek was trying to make a joke out of him. He couldn't help urging, "Say it." There was no way that Derek would simply reveal everything. He then proceeded to say, "How should I say that? I can only say that I know everything, but I don't know myself. You can't understand it if I myself don't know who I am. So, let's both not waste our precious time and go our own ways." Francis carefully analyzed Derek's words. Obviously, he didn't get any useful information in the end. "So your identity is?" Francis asked with an expectant look and a notebook in his hands. "I know everything I understand, and it's useless to say what I don't understand. So do you understand who I might be?" The smile on Francis's face froze instantly. What did he understand? Wasn't this all just a bunch of nonsense? At this point, Francis couldn't see Derek confessing to his real identity anytime soon. His face darkened. "Very well. I hope you can leave the lab while retaining this quality humor. If you remain alive till then, that is." Francis stopped talking politely with Derek. He took the metal needle and pinned it to Derek's temple. After an unknown amount of time, Derek opened his eyes again. The operating room that caused him the pain was gone. He was now in a grand and spacious hall. Through the dim lights in the hall, he could see a large number of hospital beds around him. Lying on it were people in white hospital gowns. They all had different expressions, but most of them were numb. There were endless wailing and screams, and an atmosphere of despair filled the entire hall. Well, after the recovery of his consciousness, Derek's body suddenly felt a sharp pain. He held his chest with his hand tightly. Cold sweat oozed out from his forehead as his face turned very pale from pain. At that moment, Derek felt as if countless ants were gnawing on his body. He did not feel this pain till now because he was unconscious. It was happening because his body was connected to the high-voltage electric current. Under the stimulation of the electric current, his muscles and nerves suffered serious damage. His organs were damaged, resulting in intense pain. But he had felt things like this before. If Derek hadn't gotten used to the pain from the experience during this time, he probably couldn't help crying out at the moment. "I really might die anytime now." After a lot of efforts on suppressing the maddening pain, Derek said to himself. Following his thoughts, a character panel suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. Player: Derek. Sex: male. Age: 18 years old. Talent: none. The character panel that appeared in front of Derek's eyes was the same as the one from the game he was playing before coming here, Danganronpa. It was the mobile game officially launched by the famous company, Spike. Players could unlock various talents by completing tasks and getting achievements, allowing them to build a character as they liked. In the game, everyone aimed to make a perfect being with all the talents. After his traversion, this game followed Derek to this world. Having read all the web novels in his past, Derek knew what systems like these were capable of. It was now the only hope for Derek to escape from this torture. Author note: Danganronpa is a Japanese dark adventure video game primarily surrounding various groups of apparent high school students who are forced into murdering each other by a robotic teddy bear named Monokuma. Chapter 2. It was not long before Derek's sudden joy was taken away, and he was sent into despair again. When the guards nearby saw him awake, they took him for some treatment and onto the beating room. For the past 2 months, Derek had wanted to escape this lab and live freely again. He wished for some kind of God-sent angel to help him every day. Derek, who had seen the Deadpool movie, knew the true face of this institute he was in. With the temptation of curing incurable diseases, they especially attract a group of patients as experimental subjects for research. The unknown medicine that was injected into Derek's body at the beginning was a special serum that needed the adrenal hormone secreted by the human body as a catalyst to stimulate mutations in the mutant genes that might exist in his DNA. The mutated genes are very special. They can endow the human body with various inconceivable abilities, enabling the wielder to have power beyond human comprehension. And these kinds of power users who had their powers obtained like this were called mutants. Even for the experimental subjects whose genes were successfully mutated, the fate waiting for them at the end was not freedom as they wished, but to be forced to wear collars that can suppress their self-awareness slowly, and eventually become obedient mutant slaves. They are then packaged by the Research Institute to be sold in auctions. To put it simply, this Research Institute was a mutant slave processing factory, and all experimental bodies are their raw products. For the past 2 months, Derek had been frantically searching for a way to escape from this lab. Finally, a few days ago, he got the Danganronpa game interface in his mind as well as the achievement system that came in the game. Derek currently sat on his bed after being beaten. He wailed in pain from the wounds on his body and the internal damage to his organs. System, Derek said in his mind as the achievements and title panel opened right in front of his eyes again. The sudden appearance of this mysterious blue panel in front of his eyes right after he only says a word in his head never ceased to amaze Derek. Title: Super High School Level Lucky, unopened. Title: Super High School Level Fighter, unopened. Title: Super High School Level Sharpshooter, unopened. Most of the densely packed texts were titles that Derek was familiar with. They were all super high school level talents from Danganronpa. But sadly, most of these titles are in grey color, meaning that they were not unlocked yet. According to the mobile game settings, players need to meet the various conditions of the achievement or task to be eligible to unlock the corresponding title. In Danganronpa's worldview, the super high school level represents the topmost talent in a certain field. This means that people with the title of super high school level, whether it is any ability or strength, completely crush anyone and everyone in this field. Derek cast his gaze to the last column on the panel, only to see bright red color displayed at the bottom. It was the title he had been waiting for a long time to unlock. He didn't know what it did, but it was the only title he could get in his current situation. Disliked by the Death God. Completed. Unlock condition: Escape 15 near-death situations, 15/15. Title awarded: Super High School Level, Stuntman. Do you want to unlock the title? What? For real, is it finally done? Derek's heart burst from joy, and the corners of his mouth rose crazily. The scene in front of him was the reward for Derek to persevere recently. If it weren't for the emergence of the achievement system, which gave Derek the hope of living to a certain extent, before Derek's body would break physically, he would completely die mentally. He could simply not bear the pain of the torture anymore. In this closed environment, which was like a prison, there were a lot of experiments who had been broken mentally and became lunatics. Fortunately, the unlocking conditions for this title were surprisingly convenient to unlock with Derek's current situation. After each torture after getting the system, the progress bar for the achievement would increase a little. But the wait was finally over. The progress bar has finally reached the end. Yeah, give it to me. Without the slightest hesitation, Derek directly chose yes. Title gained successfully. Right bracket. Title: Super High School Level, Stuntman. Description: a stuntman who can complete all thrilling shots, a person who is hated by death, even she hates you. She never accepts you, so you can never die. Characteristic: immortality. That's awesome, Derek said. He felt his heart skip a beat from joy. Before this, Derek had no idea what this stuntman title did. He just assumed it was something good and unlocked it. After all, in a lab like this, he cannot make 20 friends for some other achievement. As for the specific effect of the titles, Derek did not know about most of them. In the world of Danganronpa, super high school level talent itself was a very illogical existence. Even something as mysterious and unexpected as luck was a talent. One of the most famous characters having such a talent was Nagito Kameda. Nagito's talent could affect everything around him, just so that he could be the luckiest. As long as it is something that Nagito wants, fate itself would take the initiative to send it to him. However, even the luck of the super high school level is not enough to shock Derek so much. What really shocked him was the characteristic of this title he obtained: immortality. Although he didn't understand why the stuntman's talent was immortality, it could be like since he survived so many near-death situations, he was gifted with the blessing to always make it out alive. Derek couldn't understand it. Oh well, it doesn't matter right now, Derek said as he felt warm in his body, which quickly spread along the blood. His body was undergoing drastic changes. The first thing that ushered in the change was his eyes. The myopia that had troubled Derek for many years gradually disappeared, bringing his eyesight back to perfect. The second was Derek's dilapidated body. These days of high-intensity torture had left him with many hidden diseases in his body. Derek had to endure its pain along with the torture without any treatment. However, at that moment a warm current penetrated deep into Derek's body. He felt as if he was once again under the sun, sitting on the green grass after a morning jog. His body was repairing itself at an extremely fast speed, returning to its original healthy state. Ever since crossing over, Derek had never felt his body so fresh and relaxed as right now. He felt like he was reborn with a healthy body. Fuck yeah. Derek yelled at the top of his lungs while lying on the bed, momentarily forgetting the fact that he was still in the lab. Chapter 3. Derek's shout of happiness echoed through the hall. Listening to the scream, the guards in charge of looking over the experiments looked towards each other. Nice. Another one has gone crazy. The guards were no strangers to the experiments yelling. In this dark lab, the most indispensable thing is the experimental subjects who have gone crazy. Often, those signs meant that the experiment had started to manifest their powers as a mutant. They thought that Derek probably was the same. They just glanced at him a few times, and then turned their eyes away. What's the deal? Fuck, you interrupted my date with Scarlett. At this time, a hoarse voice came from the bed next to Derek's. Derek calmed down a little and turned his head to look in the direction of the voice. The person who spoke was a young man with a beard on his face. His face was frighteningly pale, with two cheekbones protruding high on his thin cheeks. He looked like a terminally ill patient living his last few days. The young man glared at Derek viciously. Damn it, we were about to proceed to the last step of foreplay before the last base. But Scarlett was scared away by your yelling. My date was completely ruined. Seeing the serious expression of the man, Derek was a little speechless. Wade, I remember you said that you have a girlfriend outside, right? Instead of having these useless daydreams all day long, you should find a way to get out quickly. Otherwise, a few years later, you would suddenly have children call you uncle. Fuck. Hearing Derek, Wade immediately broke out of the role he was playing and said angrily, after I get rid of those damn cancer cells, I will go out and get Vanessa back. Then I will show you the most beautiful woman in this world. The premise is to be able to go out, Derek said. As Derek said, he suddenly remembered an important matter related to Wade. The man in front of him was named Wade, full name Wade Wilson. He was the man who would become Deadpool in the future. The famous mercenary who is also one of Marvel's best characters. When the cancer cells were detected in his body, Wade, who had nowhere to go, took the initiative to participate in this genetic modification experiment as a volunteer. Inside the lab, his bed was right beside Derek, who had just crossed over. The two easily got along due to their similar personalities. Though this was a result of Derek's initiative to get acquainted with the Deadpool, as time went by, Derek and Wade became good friends. Regardless of Wade's unreliable character as a top mercenary, Wade's abilities were beyond doubt. If Wade hadn't voluntarily stayed silent in the research institute to undergo the so-called genetic modification, the security team of this research institute might not be able to keep him quiet. According to the development that happened in the movie, only after Wade gets his self-healing power, he came up with the idea of escaping. According to his plan, there will be an explosion in the research institute, which will cause a fire, and the fire will spread to the entire research institute. At that time, this place will become the most dangerous area, and all people staying in the research institute would face lethal threats. Derek was planning to escape secretly amid the chaos that Wade would cause, but plans can't always keep up with the changes. Derek did not expect that the title of super high school stuntman would be so powerful. In the blink of an eye, all his serious injuries were recovered. His body was so healed that it was suspicious now. If any of the guards or the lab staff, especially Francis, noticed Derek's ability, it would be harder for him to escape under the extra attention they would give him. And so, Derek must now escape from the lab before his ability is exposed. Time is running out for Derek, and it does not wait for anyone, not even the protagonist. Derek quickly went through the whole movie's events in his mind. Suddenly, he had a bold idea. Looking at Wade, who was still shouting at Derek for ruining his date, Derek narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "Wade, do you know the secret of Ajax?" What secret? Wade suddenly became interested. Because of his nice face, Wade often received special care from Francis. Hearing that it was about Francis's secret, Wade was immediately interested and serious. Derek smiled slightly. Actually, the name Ajax is fake. His real name is Francis. Ajax was originally a company that manufactured dish soaps, but that Francis guy took it for himself. No way, are you serious? Yup, it definitely is true. This secret is only known to me at the moment. Ha 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 ha. I knew Ajax was a fake name, but I didn't expect it to be a brand of dish soap. What parents would even name their child Ajax? Wade laughed like crazy, his body contorted on the hospital bed. At this time, Derek's expression revealed a hint of worry. By the way, it's only the two of us who know about this. Remember not to tell anyone else, especially Ajax. I mean Francis. Be sure to remember, don't laugh at his name as a dish soap brand. Francis has a short temper. He will bite when provoked. Derek still seemed to be worried, emphasizing several times over the matter. Don't worry, don't forget what I used to do. Secrecy is the basic professional quality of a mercenary, Wade said. He still continued laughing loudly, but patted his chest to show reliability. Seeing his appearance, Derek sighed and nodded. Well, I'll believe you. On the next day, Francis appeared in the lobby as usual. As the person in charge of the research institute, Francis needs to regularly check the progress of the experimental subjects. After all, these experimental subjects are their important materials. If something goes wrong, the loss would be great. After inspecting several subjects, Francis picked up the test reports of other subjects and continued to walk deep into the hall. Soon, Francis came to Derek and Wade's bed. Right when Francis stood in front of them, Wade looked at Francis and saw his face. PFFT. Francis was taken aback for a moment by Wade's reaction, but before he could ask or say anything, Wade writhed inexplicably on the bed. Immediately afterwards, unscrupulous laughter sounded in the hall. I'm sorry, I can't help it. There are such idiots in this world who use the brand of dish soaps as their name. Damn, it's so funny. Ha ha ha, Wade said while continuing with his rolling. Derek stared at Wade, realizing just how royally screwed up he was. Chapter 4. Wade laughed loudly. He continued to emphasize Francis's name being the same as a soap company's. Bring him with us, Francis said as he did not pay any attention to Derek and turned around. Derek was about to try to save Wade when he looked at Wade's face and saw him wink at him. At that moment, Derek understood what Wade was doing. Wade had noticed the healed body of Derek, and he also knew what would happen if Francis discovered it, so, in order to keep Derek safe, Wade diverted all their attention to himself. Before Derek could even move, Wade was gone. He was taken away by the guards while being followed by Francis. Even then they were tens of meters away. Derek could hear Wade's loud and exaggerated laughter. Looking at the back of Francis going away, Derek secretly heaved a sigh of relief. He was almost discovered. Thinking of the sacrifice that Wade just made for him, Derek silently prayed for Wade in his heart. Thank you, mate. I hope you are fine and well. Also, please at least let me be awake when your plan starts. The time at the institute went by particularly slowly. Days were long and nights were shorter. Well, the experiments did not even know what the sun was anymore. They all had never seen the green grass ever since they were brought into the lab. Meanwhile, for days, Derek had been lying on his bed. He was keeping himself awake at all times for fear of missing the most critical moment in Wade's plan. After Wade had left some time ago, Derek had been waiting for the only chance he might have to leave this cursed lab. Boom. Suddenly, there was a shock in the hall. The loud sound deafened everyone's ears. Before anyone could react, a wave of scorching high temperature swept across the hall in an instant, accompanied by a terrifying explosion. Shockwave swept across the entire hall. Derek only felt a flash of fire in front of his eyes as a huge amount of force directly overturned him. He fell heavily on the ground together with the hospital bed. Under the pressure of this force, the hospital bed broke into several pieces with a bang, and Derek was flung to the corner of the hall. Under the influence of the shockwave, Derek's body was completely covered with flames, and his hospital clothes had already been destroyed by the flames. His exposed skin was completely burnt with an unknown number of bones broken. If he was still a normal person, these kinds of injuries would be more than enough to kill him twice. Derek did not only not die, but he also stood up trembling. The charred skin on his body was rapidly chipping down, while new skin appeared right in place of the burnt one. His body was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The blood flowing from the wounds had also stopped coming out. In a few moments, all the horrific injuries disappeared without leaving behind any scars. The black coal-like burnt skin had all fallen on the floor of the hall. Successful. Derek was ecstatic. His smile made him seem like a maniac worse than Francis. He didn't care about the hole that turned into a sea of fire in front of him. His escape plan was extremely simple, which was to advance the plot that should have happened sometime earlier. I mean, this also works, but whatever. Although Derek had not planned it like this. When Wade was taken away to be tortured, Francis must have injected him with the serum to make him a mutant. Francis would do that to everyone every time he tortured them. This gave Wade an early self-healing factor, which in turn made him blow up the lab and create a chance for Derek to escape. The explosion came suddenly and lasted for only a short minute. The hall was in a mess after the explosion, with debris scattered all over the ground. At this moment, the hall was full of screams and cries for help. One could only see horrifically charred corpses of the experimental subjects or those who survived the explosion, but were trapped under the debris and could not escape. Due to the large number of flammable materials in the research institute, the fire quickly spread to the entire hall. The originally dark room was burning brightly in the sea of orange flames. It was unknown what compound caught fire for the flame to be of such peculiar shade. The smell wafted around, causing Derek to cough a few times. Derek quickly covered his mouth and nose, and immediately ran out of the hole, regardless of the obstruction made by fire. As time passed, Derek could clearly feel that the temperature around him was rising rapidly, and the scorching air made it more difficult for him to breathe. Because he was barefoot, every step he took felt like a punishment. If it weren't for his immortality, which ensured that Derek was in the perfect state all the time, he might have not lasted for 2 minutes in this fire. At this time, a figure appeared in Derek's sight. Judging by his attire, this person was clearly a guard of the research institute. He was clutching his injured right arm and struggling to move forward while using the wall as a support. The guard noticed Derek at the same time. He was taken aback by his appearance and then looked at the burnt gown on Derek's body. "Wait, you are SHH." Derek raised his fist without any delay and punched the guard's face with all his strength. Before the injured guard could react, his face and nose were severely injured. He fell to the ground with his face up. Derek also let out a muffled grunt as his dislocated phalanges began to repair automatically due to the reaction force. "This body is damn weak. I was stronger." When the guard fell on the ground and was unable to resist anymore, Derek raised his foot and kicked him on the head violently. He vented out all his frustration on the guard for beating him for the previous months. At first, the guard wanted to struggle, but Derek didn't give him a chance at all. It was not soon until he gave up struggling after getting his nose kicked in by Derek's heels. Apart from a few unconscious twitches of his hands and feet, there was no other movement by him in the end. Glancing at the bloody guard, Derek felt a little uncomfortable. It was his first time doing something like this, but he did not have many choices, and these people did not deserve to be spared either. Derek let out a breath slowly, finally venting some of the resentment that had been pent up in his heart these days. He squatted down, reached out and searched the guard. He soon found a small rifle on the guard's back. This was the first time Derek has touched a real gun in both of his lives. It was very heavy. Derek thought for a while, and then began to take off the guard's clothes and shoes, and put them on himself. Crack! At this moment, the sound of something breaking came from nearby. By now, the fire had gone out of control, and some small pieces of gravel kept falling down from the roof. Derek knew that he couldn't stay there much longer. Otherwise, even if he couldn't die, he would be buried alive under the collapsed building, and it would be a pain to climb out. However, the entire space was filled with billowing thick smoke, which made it difficult for him to see anything around him. Whatever. Derek gave up thinking, picked up the rifle and ran wildly in any direction. Chapter 5. At the same time, in the area where the explosion occurred, Francis, who had just learned about the explosion in the lab, immediately rushed over to the scene, followed by more than a dozen guards, all of whom were holding fire extinguishers trying to extinguish the surrounding fire. Looking at the messy scene, Francis walked with a gloomy face. After walking a few steps, Francis saw an opening in the oxygen chamber in the corner, and Wade, who was supposed to be lying unconscious in it, had disappeared. Boom! Suddenly, a figure rushed out of the thick smoke and rushed towards the guards standing at the edge of the line. With a sharp broken piece of glass in his hand, he slashed the guard's throat. The strong smell of blood quickly spread in the air. The guard covered his neck in astonishment, wanting to ask the others for help, but he could only moan lowly. It didn't take them long to figure out that the person who just appeared was Wade. At the moment, Wade was naked and his face and body could be seen. It was covered with rotten scars, and none of the skin was intact. It looked like it was fished out of sulfuric acid. Wade stared fixedly at Francis. His hoarse voice, filled with endless anger, made everyone shiver. It was right as Derek had previously expected. After Francis took Wade, he began to abuse Wade more cruelly than ever. Perhaps in retaliation for Wade's unstoppable laughing, Francis locked Wade in a device that could control oxygen, leaving him in a state of hypoxia for a long time, and tortured Wade repeatedly. As a result, Francis's crazy behavior caused the heightened secretion of adrenal hormones in Wade's body, accelerating the stimulation of the serum in his body, giving him the healing ability, and getting rid of the threat of cancer. But the cost of this power was huge. It left Wade with a disfigured face and horrific scars all over his body forever. Seeing his face, even Wade himself couldn't accept it. After Francis had left the lab previously, Wade detonated the instrument with a stolen match and caused a horrible explosion with the inflammable substances on the side. He only survived by the virtue of his healing power. Even after the explosion, instead of escaping the lab, Wade chose to stay here and lie in wait for Francis to come again. It turned out to be you. Seeing Wade's appearance, Francis finally understood how the inexplicable explosion came about. Without hesitation, he immediately issued an order to the guards. Shoot. Kill him. Wade, however, was faster than Francis's orders. At the same time as Francis opened his mouth, Wade had already taken the rifle from the dead bodyguard's corpse, opened the safety, raised the muzzle of the gun, put his shoulder against the gun's end, and pulled the trigger. His movements were smooth and seamless, as if this set of movements had already been etched into his muscles' memory. Bang, bang, bang. There was a loud gunshot. The bullets hit the heads of 3 guards. The other guards were taken aback by Wade's aim. After Wade shot again and killed 2 more guards, they finally set up their rifles and shot in Wade's direction blindly. Flames spurted out from the muzzle as several magazines were fired. The howling rain of bullets hit continued. Wade tumbled dexterously, hid behind the barrier, and continued to shoot at the guards in all directions with the rifle he took. The smoky surroundings did not affect Wade's aim in the slightest. As an extremely experienced mercenary, such an environment is more conducive to his style of combat. The fierce gun battle went on. As for Francis, he didn't participate in the shootout, but hid in the wreckage of a large instrument around the corner. Francis didn't interrupt the situation and sat there silently, as if he was waiting for something to happen. At this moment, there was a faint sound of footsteps treading as the sound of gunshots continued. Immediately afterwards, Francis saw a guard coming and turning over the wreckage of the instrument he was covering himself with his hands, and sitting next to him with a rifle. As if he sensed Francis's gaze, the guard turned his head and looked over. The eyes of the two met. The atmosphere suddenly became awkward. Derek, who was sitting there, mistaken as a guard, felt that he was unlucky. Not only could he not find the exit of the research institute, but accidentally broke into the epicenter of everything. Once he looked around, he saw Wade slaughtering a group of guards with glass in his hands. Derek was worried that he would be involved in this fierce gun battle, and wanted to go back, only to see the roof fall down right behind him, leaving him only with the option to go ahead. He then found a place to hide, but he never expected that he would run into Francis there. Francis looked at the dusty Derek, thinking that he was one of the surviving guards. Francis frowned slightly. "What are you doing?" "Fight." Seeing that Francis did not recognize him, Derek let his identity stay hidden and said under his breath, "It's too dangerous right now. I have to protect you." "I don't need protection," Francis said without any bother. Derek nodded vigorously and then proceeded to ask Francis, "Then, can you protect me?" Francis immediately knew that something was wrong and asked, "Who are you?" "I know what I understand, and it's useless to talk about what I don't know. How can I tell you who I am if I myself don't know the answer to it?" Derek asked helplessly. It's you, Francis shouted. Hearing the familiar sentence pattern, his pupils shrank suddenly. Chapter 6. It's you, Francis shouted. Hearing the familiar sentence pattern, his pupils shrank suddenly. Seeing him, Derek raised the rifle in his hand to aim at Francis's head, and without saying a word, he pulled the trigger. Although Derek has never used a gun, he knew the premise of shooting, so he did not make any low-level mistakes, such as forgetting to open the safety. As early as the moment he saw Francis, he was already planning to shoot him in his head. At such a short distance, no matter how bad his aim was, Francis couldn't dodge bullets. However, Derek far underestimated Francis's reflexes. Facing Derek's sneak attack, Francis, who was originally frightened and angry, suddenly stretched out his right hand and pushed down the muzzle of the gun that was about to kill him, and all the bullets fired were received by the ground. Damn fast Derek was about to take back the rifle when he saw a fist very close to his face. Derek, who couldn't dodge in time, could only raise his arms to block in haste. The moment the fist touched the arm, Derek could even hear the brittle sound of his own arm's bones being broken again. This force was beyond his ability to resist. The power that Francis shows now reminds Derek of some movie clips. That is, as the manager of this mutant slave processing factory, Francis was also a mutant with power. His physical quality had far surpassed ordinary people, and all his pain receptors had been surgically removed. But even so, Derek still didn't let go of his grip on the rifle. Francis was a little surprised by this. He snorted coldly and punched Derek again. The sound of the air due to the speed of Francis's fist rang in Derek's ears. Derek did not retreat, but rather advanced. Before the fist hit, he grabbed Francis's arms, trying to knock him to the ground with the weight of his body. However, Francis seemed to know what Derek was thinking. He suddenly exerted strength from his waist to stabilize the balance of his body, and unexpectedly, he still stood after Derek's moves. Next, Francis raised his leg and kicked Derek hard in the abdomen. Derek felt a terrifying force coming, and he immediately tried to step back with the rifle, but in the end his abdomen was kicked by Francis. Derek did not look at what was behind him, and fell right in between the guards who were a few meters away. This series of events all happened in less than 10 seconds. The guards, who were still fighting with Wade, didn't know what was happening behind them. They were unaware of anyone even entering the area, until they saw Derek suddenly fall in the middle of them. Regardless of the severe pain in his abdomen, Derek immediately got up from the ground and shouted, "Good Lord, this subject has accomplices aiding him. Brothers, let's kill them quickly," Derek said, and raised his rifle first and fired at Francis's position. Facts have proven that the masses like to blindly follow people wearing suits. Seeing that Derek was wearing the same uniform as them, the guards took his words to be true and subconsciously raised their guns to shoot in the same direction as him. Francis quickly squatted down with his head in front of his arms and hid behind the instrument again. At the same time, Francis roared in rage, "Fuck. Use your brain. It's me, your *King shooting at." Hearing Francis's voice, the guards were all taken aback. Derek put on a look of disbelief on his face and said, "It turns out that Francis is an undercover agent, and has been roaming openly, acting like he is our real boss." The guards finally realized that the guy dressed like them was the real fake. But it was too late. Derek had already turned his gun towards them. Boom. After the words fell, the still warm rifle sputtered flames again, taking the lives of all the guards. Derek was shaken a little after killing people, but seeing the situation he was in right now, he tried to remain composed. "You did a great job, little guy. If I were the judge of a reality show, I would definitely give you 9 points for your acting skills just now," Wade said as he came out of his cover while clapping. Derek stared at Wade's disfigured face for a while, and then asked him in genuine confusion, "Who are you?" Wade was taken aback by Derek's question, but he still answered, "I'm your sweet neighbor, Wade." Derek shook his head and denied, "Impossible. Wade is not as handsome as you." It would have been fine if Derek had still denied from having recognized him, but this. "It's all the concrete's fault." Wade was furious and fired a volley of bullets towards Francis's cover. "Get out. See what you did to my face. You ruined the dream boy of thousands of girls and maybe men." Seeing that all the guards were dead, Francis was calm and walked out from behind the bunker, with his hands raised up in the air. Francis raised the corner of his mouth and sneered, "You won't kill me. Only I can restore your face back to its original appearance." Wade then continued to say, "You're right. I won't kill you. Rather, I will cut your ass and stick it to your mouth, so that you can taste the taste of your shit," Wade said while pointing his rifle at Francis. Derek looked at Wade in disgust. "That's disgusting, Mr. Handsome," Derek said while looking at Wade. Suddenly, heavy footsteps started approaching them from some distance. The two turned around quickly, only to see a woman rushing towards them. Without any hesitation, Derek and Wade raised their guns and fired at her at the same time. Derek noticed that the woman didn't even dodge. She let the bullets hit her body, and the bullets made a ringing sound when they hit her. The woman then proceeded to punch Derek, who was the closest to her. "Isn't she a?" thought flashed in Derek's mind. While thinking, he accidentally missed the chance to avoid her punch. It was too late for him to dodge, so he tried to defend himself with the rifle. Although he knew it won't be of any help, there was no harm in trying. The rifle in Derek's hand broke into 2 pieces, and the woman's fist hit Derek's chest with an undiminished force. The surrounding area suddenly changed. It was as if Derek had been hit head-on by a heavy truck, and his whole body had been squashed on the wall. He spat out a mouthful of blood, which was mixed with blood from his internal organs. His chest was injured severely, and his body limply fell on the ground. Chapter 7. Fuck. Seeing Derek's miserable state, Wade cursed secretly in his heart. However, right now he couldn't care less about others. The moment the strong woman knocked Derek into the air, Wade suddenly jumped up and landed on the back of the woman. He then immediately wrapped his arms around her neck, trying to put pressure on her windpipe and suffocate her. But even when she was faced with Wade's naked choke, the woman was not affected at all. It was Wade hanging on her back that annoyed her more. The muscular woman broke Wade's arm easily breaking the so-called unescapable rear naked choke. Wade was surprised, but he didn't forget to say, "For a lady, aren't you a bit too strong? I feel sorry for your husband. I bet he won't be able to dash." Before his words could be finished, the woman bent over and kneeled fiercely, smashing Wade's back to the ground. There was a crackling sound of bones, and Wade was directly smashed with an unknown number of disabilities with a single strike. In just this short moment, the woman had easily dealt with the 2 of them. The woman was obviously pissed off by Wade's words. She picked up a steel bar lying on the ground nearby, and mercilessly inserted it into Wade's back. The steel bar directly penetrated the floor and fixed Wade on the ground, making Wade completely lose his ability to resist. "Angel, calm down. There's no need to be angry at a dead man." Francis smiled and patted Angel on the shoulder. "How about what I want you to do?" Angel then said coldly, "All the materials in the Institute have been destroyed without leaving any traces, and the surviving subjects have also been transferred to other branches." "Very well. We should leave, then." Ignoring Derek and Wade, Francis turned and left with Angel. Only corpses and wreckage remained at the scene, as the sea of fire continued to engulf the whole building. Not long after Angel and Francis left, Wade, who was lying on the ground, suddenly moved. He raised his head with difficulty and looked at Derek still lying on the ground and not moving. After getting along with Derek, even if it was for this short period, Derek could be regarded as a good friend. When Derek died right in front of his eyes like this and all Wade could do was watch, it hurt his heart. This reminded Wade of some cruel and painful memories from his past. "Sorry, you might not be able to see the world's most boat row." Holy motherfucker. Watching Derek's lifeless immobile corpse stand up again, Wade's originally consoling tone turned into a panic trill in an instant. "The fuck is happening? Are you a zombie? Phoo. Calm down. I can't die and neither can you." Derek walked over, dragging his body while it healed itself. He grabbed the steel bar on Wade's back and pulled it out using all the strength he could muster while lying. The moment the steel bar was pulled out of the body, Wade looked down at his chest, and the bloody wound began to heal quickly. He couldn't help shouting, "Oh my god, I'm infected too. I'm going to become a zombie like you. Wait, can I only eat human flesh now? Fuck no, my favorite chicken taco. Stop screaming. We need to get out of this damn place. It's about to collapse." Derek grabbed the yelling Wade and ran outside with him. At that moment, the fire had reached its peak, and the thick smoke reduced all vision down to zero. Derek could not see any way out. "You came in from outside. You should know the way. Where to go now, Mr. Handsome?" Derek asked. "You came inside too, bitch," Wade said as he started thinking. Wade thought for a while, and then pointed in a direction with uncertainty. There was a sea of fire in front of them, but that didn't stop the two. Without any further ado, Derek picked up Wade, who was still considering himself a zombie, and rushed into the fire. A few minutes later, two figures covered in dust rushed out of an abandoned factory building outside a remote suburb. Before the lab could completely collapse, Derek and Wade rushed out of it safely. We're finally free. Looking at the abandoned factory building ignited by the fire, Derek felt a burst of complicated emotions in his heart. After 2 full months, he finally walked out of that dark and oppressive space. He was happy to breathe like a free man again. But what should he do next? He hadn't decided about anything on what he wanted to do yet. Derek couldn't help but feel a little confused. Ever since he had traversed, Derek had been kept trapped in the research institute. Now, as Derek walked out of the research institute, he was bewildered to realize that he had entered a completely strange world, where he was a complete outsider with no trace of familiarity. He had come to this world in the same body as his previous one, so there would obviously be no previous owner and a previous identity of him here. Derek let out a long breath and turned to look at Wade, who had also drowned in deep thought. Wade, what's next? I need to find the cure and become a human again. Answer me correctly, bitch. It is the same as what I told you before. I want to get Vanessa back. That's good. So are you going to go find her while naked? Since they had just escaped from the sea of flames, it was inevitable that their clothes were all burnt. Derek, who was wearing a uniform, was okay. There were still some cloth strips left on his body, which covered the key parts. But Wade was different. He was butt naked right now. When Derek, not because he wanted to but unconsciously, looked down, he saw a scorched banana on Wade's body. Derek then proceeded to vomit several times after seeing something he never would have wished to, and that too, burnt. Chapter 8. New York Journal, May the 5th, 2008. The military announced today that Tony Stark, the chairman of Stark Industries, was attacked by terrorists yesterday afternoon, after demonstrating the newly developed Jericho missile in Kuna Province, Afghanistan. All 13 American soldiers who accompanied him were killed. Right now, Tony Stark's whereabouts were unknown, and the military has said they would not give up the search and rescue operation. On the streets of Brooklyn, New York. Derek stood alone at the entrance of an alley. He had already taken off his tattered uniform and changed into clean and new clothes. After escaping from the research institute hidden inside the abandoned factory, Derek followed Wade here. At the moment he was holding an old newspaper in his hand and reading it. Tony Stark. As long as one has watched Marvel, one must be familiar with this name. After all, the beginning of the entire Marvel series started with the legendary Iron Man. The paper texture and color of the newspaper in his hands made it clear to Derek that it was at least older than a month. In other words, the current timeline was before the birth of the superhero, Iron Man. Avengers had not yet appeared. Even Captain America will be unfrozen at least a few years later, let alone several major events that are related to Avengers, So it seems that the Earth is relatively safe now. At this time, Derek saw a person in a red hoodie walking towards him. Well, you found your girlfriend. I found her. Under the hood was Wade. His eyes look a little downcast and sad. I didn't dare to meet her at all. I am a complete monster now. You didn't see the expressions of those people walking by, looking at me. It was even worse than seeing a zombie. If Vanessa saw me like this, she might think of me as a zombie and shoot me down. Derek patted Wade on the shoulder and comforted him. Don't worry. You have healing powers now. One shot won't kill you. ... Wade's emotions are a bit incoherent. Come on. I'll take you to meet a friend of mine first, Wade said as he walked into the alley while Derek followed him silently. Soon, the two stopped in the depths of the alley. Wade walked to an iron gate and knocked on it. Weasel, your daddy Wade is back. Open the door. Derek glanced at the crooked signboard next to the door. Sister Margaret's School for Wayward Children. Seeing such a unique name, Derek knew that this was the mercenary bar that Wade used to frequent. After a while, the iron door of the bar opened. A short man with disheveled hair stared wide-eyed at Wade in disbelief. Wade, it's really you. You crawled out of your grave, fucking zombie. Oh, so that's how it is, Weasel said. Seeing the two sitting in front of the bar, gulping down the lunch he just bought, Weasel said helplessly. So you cured cancer, took your bed mate, and ran away from that mutant club, and ended up at my place again. That's very much correct. Except, I was carried by him. Wade spoke vaguely as he opened an unopened bottle of wine on the bar, ignoring the Weasel's distressed expression, and drank it. Derek did not like drinking. In front of the Weasel, he opened the freezer and took out a bottle of water. The corner of Weasel's mouth twitched when he saw it. The two of them came here to eat and drink for free. This wasn't a shelter home or some charity house. He looked at Wade, who had been wearing a hood, and persuaded him, "Wade, Vanessa loves you. During the year you disappeared, she never gave up looking for you. I don't think she will actually care about your appearance though." Wade removed his hood while Weasel was talking, revealing his terrifying appearance. "Would she still like me? It's hard." "What is?" Down third, Derek was talking, but his mouth was shut by Wade's hand. Meanwhile, Weasel shook his head without hesitation. Wade turned and looked at Derek. "Do you like my face?" When Derek heard this, he thought to himself, is this a question you need to ask? However, no matter what, Wade was his friend, so he wouldn't hurt his self-esteem by answering too bluntly. Derek thought about it for a while, and then said euphemistically, "It's not bad, you look rather special." His words did make Wade feel better. Wade seemed to see a glimmer of hope. He couldn't wait to ask, "Tell me, what's so special?" Yeah, so, special. Derek looked left and right, but he couldn't think of anything special about this face. I had no choice but to bite the bullet and say, "It's very rough. I mean, not many people have." Derek's shoulder was greeted by Weasel's hands patting. He knew that Derek tried his best to keep it light for Wade. Chapter 9. Seeing Wade's terrifyingly disfigured face, Weasel gave up on the idea of persuasion. His face is thinking about Wade's face. Weasel suddenly looked at Derek. "Wade, didn't you say that the two of you have the same abilities?" Why didn't his face change? After the two arrived, Wade told Weasel everything, including his and Derek's ability. Wade thought that Derek had a genetic mutation just like himself. In this regard, Derek explained while drinking water, the cancer cells in Wade's body have not been completely eliminated. They are just not as fast as the healing cells in his body. So, he became how he is now. Poor Wade, I can understand you, really. After all, you look like a hybrid mutant avocado ghost, Weasel said. His words not only failed to comfort Wade, but aroused Wade's anger even more. Wade slammed the table and stood up immediately. "I changed my mind. Before meeting Vanessa, I have to find that damn concrete and force him to fix my face. I will then return everything to him without reservation. Finally use a gun to put a hole in his head, and use his head as a shitting cup for the dogs in the Motherfucking future." Weasel said, "Sorry, I didn't want to know about that at all, and I don't want to imagine that picture either. But, that Francis guy you just mentioned, he doesn't know you're both alive, does he?" "Yes, he should think we are dead." Derek nodded. At that time, Derek had heard what Francis said before he left with Angel. According to Francis, Wade and Derek already died in the fire. As a friendly reminder, if you want to find trouble with Francis, remember to disguise yourself. Wear a mask or something. Wade, I'm not targeting you. It's just that your current appearance it's easy to recognize. Wade was not angry, but nodded in agreement. "You are right. I want to give myself a stage name too. A code name similar to Captain America. Captain Wade. What do you think?" "Yeah, definitely no. It's bad. We need to think about something else. Let's just name you Deadpool," Derek said as he pointed to the blackboard above the bar. There are many names and bets on the blackboard. This was the characteristic gameplay of this mercenary bar. The game was very simple. It is to bet on which mercenary will die within a certain period of time, and the person who wins the bet will get double the money. Hearing the name, Wade's eyes lit up. Deadpool. That name sounds good. Okay, I'll be Deadpool from now on. Derek asked curiously. "It's just that, how will you find Francis? Now that he has run away and the clues from the research institute have been burned, there shouldn't be any traces of him left." "How do you think I got into that lab before?" Wade asked. He already had the means to meet Francis again. They need a large number of experimental subjects, but they are also afraid of attracting the attention of the government, so their recruitment is carried out in secret. As long as I follow a few clues, sooner or later, I will be able to find the exact identity and location of Francis. Wade answered while sipping on his wine. Okay, then all the best to you. Call me when you need help. I will come for sure. Derek did offer to help, but Wade had no intention of asking Derek to join. Although Derek also had the super healing ability, in terms of other strengths Derek was lacking. He had almost no combat ability. As an elite mercenary, Wade doesn't need the help of Derek, a novice. Therefore, the two of them did not talk about it much. As for Derek, he has more important issues to resolve than taking revenge on Francis. That is, he needed some kind of legal document or some identity proof on him. It would be a problem for him, especially in the country of America, where police officers often ask people to show their identity proofs. Under such circumstances, it may be a luxury for Derek to live a normal life in the coming times. Therefore, Derek urgently needs some kind of legal identification or maybe a forged identity. As for what to do, Derek rubbed his chin and turned his gaze to look at Weasel. He suddenly had an idea when he looked at Weasel's face. I don't feel very good, Weasel said in his mind when he noticed Derek's gaze. I heard that you are recruiting mercenaries here. Do you think I am suitable for it by any chance? Derek asked as he put down the bottle of water. Chapter 10. Wade soon left the bar to prepare for his next course of action. Now, only Derek and Weasel were left in the bar. You want to be a mercenary? Yes, I need the money. Derek nodded. Prior to this conversation, Wade had already introduced Weasel's work to Derek. He was an information broker and an arms supplier. While running this mercenary bar, Weasel would provide mercenaries with some commissions at a reasonable price, and earn a part of the commission from them. Simply put, Weasel is an NPC in a game who releases tasks. The only difference, this wasn't a game. If you have enough money, you will also have to buy some prohibited items from the Weasel. For example, firearms. For another example, he could hook you up with a fake identity. Just in time for him. Now that Derek was short of money and needs a legal identity, it was the perfect time to find Weasel. Weasel looked at Derek with contemplation. After thinking for a while, he said, well, for Wade's sake. With that, Weasel took out a stack of gold and black cards from behind the bar. Although you may have heard of it from Wade, I will follow the process and briefly introduce the rules here. There are mainly two types of entrustments here, gold card and black card. Weasel picked up a gold card and explained, these gold cards are relatively low in difficulty. The advantage is that you don't need to bear too much risk, but relatively the payout would be less. What about the black card? Derek asked along the way. This is a bit more complicated. Weasel replaced the gold card in his hand with a black card. Black card entrustment is generally more difficult. The only plus point is that the reward is more than the gold ones. The higher the difficulty, the higher the pay. However, I must state in advance that after receiving the entrustment, how it will be completed is your choice. You can do it with whatever is within your capabilities. But, just to be clear, when you accept this commission, everything that happens to you after that, you will have to bear everything alone. Even if you are Wade's friend, I won't help you take the blame. I'm just an ordinary broker. Understood, right? Yes, understood. Derek nodded. I hope you really do understand how dangerous this profession is. Weasel shrugged, said nothing more and put all the cards in front of Derek. Derek went through them all non-seriously. The cards are all printed with the target person's name, and on the back of the card, there was a note about the task which indicates the target person, entrustment and reward. In the stack of gold cards that Weasel gave Derek, most of the remuneration after Weasel's share was around $50 to $200. As Weasel said, these gold ones basically have no risk. They are missions such as teaching a cheating man a lesson or threatening a stalker. The gold commissions are often things that won't kill people. Compared with the gold cards, the entrustments of the black cards were much more dangerous. Kill the Russian Ross gang member, Ivan Karastov, $1,000. Surveillance of the members of the Blood Wolf gang, Warner Hewlett, $5,000. Kidnap the rich businessman's daughter for ransom, Ashley Suzanne, $100,000. The entrustment of these black cards almost always involved some big and powerful or rich person, and the entrusted task also needed to adopt some necessary methods that cannot be shown in the light to be completed. Derek couldn't bear to read half of the black cards. He just wanted to make some money and get himself legal status. He didn't intend to professionally become an elite mercenary like Wade. Weasel seemed to see what Derek was thinking and joked, "What? Are you scared?" Derek said calmly, "I've never been able to do these sneaky things." At this moment, the familiar achievement system panel popped up suddenly. Title unlock chance triggered. Unlock condition. Kill 15 sinful villains. 0/15. Awarded title. Super high school level. Sharpshooter. Mission for an unlockable new title. The sudden prompt in front of his eyes immediately attracted Derek's attention. Finally, he triggered the title unlocking task again. So, basically, this means I have to kill 15 wicked people who have committed a lot of crimes. Derek read the unlocking conditions and thought about it. Right at the moment Weasel was about to put away the black cards, muttering, "You are smart. Although the rewards for these black cards are nice, completing them isn't easy, and it is not a wonderful process. If you make some unnecessary enemies, their lackeys will rush towards you like a pack of mad dogs, nor you." Derek suddenly pressed down on the black cards that Weasel was taking away and said, "I'll accept the commission from these gangsters." Weasel looked confused. Why did he suddenly change his mind when he looked like he didn't want to cause any more trouble for himself a few moments ago? Wait, didn't you say you didn't want to make unnecessary enemies? Derek looked at Weasel righteously and solemnly said, "It's not because of the money, not at all. The main thing is to fight crime. I've always disliked these kinds of gangsters, doing wicked shit to innocent people. I finally have a reason to fight with them. But you could have just killed them because they were evil. There need not. Just stop and give me the card, Weasel," Derek said with a righteous and kind smile on his face. "No way, I called this man smart," Weasel thought in his mind. Chapter 11. Derek then left the mercenary bar. Walking through the alley outside the bar, Derek fiddled with the black card in his hand. The card he took was $1,000 for killing Ivan Karastov, a member of the Russian Ross gang. It was one of the relatively low-danger black card commissions that Derek could easily take. It's not that Derek didn't want to accept a higher-level black card entrustment. The main reason is that before accepting the entrustment, one needs to pay a deposit of 10% of the entrustment fee to the broker. Definitely, Derek didn't have the money, but fortunately, Weasel helped him pay for it temporarily. After accepting the entrustment, Weasel provided some information about the target, which was the basic information attached to the entrustment, including several places and bars that the target person frequented. However, all the places were a little far away from him. Moreover, Derek was not familiar with the place he was in right now. He doesn't know which direction to go. In this case, taking a taxi was the best choice, but Derek didn't even have a penny in his pocket. So how could he have the money to take a taxi? "Hey, you there, you ching chong ping pong." Before Derek walked out of the alley, two young men suddenly blocked Derek's way. One of them grinned wide, revealing two gold front teeth. "Hand over your rice money and mobile phone." However, before he finished speaking, Derek raised his foot and kicked him between his legs. The big gold-toothed man stared wide-eyed, his eyeballs almost squeezed out of his sockets. He knelt down on the ground in a splayed position with his hands between his legs. His expression seemed dull, as he let out an unconscious whine. The other man with dirty braids was stunned. It's not like they hadn't seen resistance ever before robbing, but it's their first time seeing such a unique one. Sensing what could happen next, the man with braids covered his crotch area with his hands. He was ready to defend his vital part, but in the process, he forgot to defend his even more vital part, his face. Derek punched the man's face and knocked him down. Derek then stretched out his hand to touch the man who was down. He took out a pistol from his waist. No hate, but, as expected of free America, a 100% weapon drop rate. Derek sighed and then pointed the gun at the man with dreadlocks. Facing the long black muzzle of the gun, without saying a word, the man with dreadlocks raised his hands and put them on the back of his head decisively. He then lay down on the ground, expressing that he did not wish to resist at all. The movements were so smooth that Derek wondered if he had rehearsed in advance. The man with the dreadlocks knew they were in trouble, and tried to explain. "Bud, this may be a misunderstanding. We were just joking with you." "Oh, it's okay. I like to joke too. Give me a chance." Derek opened the safety of the pistol, put the muzzle on the forehead of the man with dreadlocks, and asked him with a bright smile on his face, "Now, tell me, how bad are you? I will consider letting you go based on that, so be careful." "The hell?" The man made a confused expression as he asked. Derek urged impatiently, "Open your mouth quickly or I'll shoot." Under the threat of gunpoint, the man with dreadlocks had no choice but to say, "I have robbed money and mobile phones of a few passers-by." Derek looked at the system panel, and there was an extra line of text next to the unlocking conditions. "Target does not meet the conditions." Derek shook his head. "You're good." The black man with dreadlocks almost choked himself. He didn't expect that the record he had worked so hard to achieve would be negated one day. Therefore, the black man with dreadlocks continued unwillingly. "I won't pay after sleeping with girls in the strip clubs." Still not bad enough. "I peeked at the next door married neighbor taking a shower." That's not too bad. It was a man. That's crazy, but not bad enough. I. The man with dreadlocks seemed to have opened up like a chatterbox, constantly yapping about his crimes. This was something that the New York Police Department couldn't do, but now Derek was doing it without any effort. But Derek was not happy with the quality of the criminal he crossed paths with. Looking at the words that he still didn't meet conditions on the panel, Derek said in a disgusted tone, "No way, that's all. With such a grade, I'm ashamed to come out and say that you guys attacked me. I'm really embarrassed." The man was silent. "Forget it. I already had an idea that the achievements would not be so easy to unlock." Derek shook his head in disappointment and also took out a pistol from the waist of the other knocked out man, then looked at the two of them. "Take out all the valuable things on your body and give them to me. Don't play any tricks with me." The two men with dirty braids knew that they had fallen. They took out all the cash and mobile phones, as if they had already resigned to their fate. Together with his companion, who had been lying on the ground even after waking up, they took everything out of their pockets. Derek was still dissatisfied and said, "Did you not hear what I said? I said all the valuable things, including the 2 gold teeth in this big guy's mouth. Also, your Jordans look good." It was at that moment that he understood, compared with the devil in front of him, his bad deeds were really nothing. Chapter 12. The two punks don't have much money or things of value on them. Apart from the scattered bills, the most valuable things were the mobile phones and 2 bloody gold teeth. As for the pair of Jordan shoes whose authenticity was still unknown, Derek couldn't stand their sour smell and threw them away. After solving the financial problem, Derek didn't wait in the alley much longer. He walked to the main street, took a taxi, and immediately set off for one of the locations given by the card. This was all for his future life and his basic necessities. If he doesn't solve this entrustment quickly, he would sleep on the street in the next few days. As night fell, the roads were brightly lit by fancy lights all over the buildings. At this moment, New York, the city that never sleeps, began with its nightlife. In a neighborhood on the west shore of Manhattan Island, an old taxi was parked on the side of the empty road. "This is the last one." Derek got out of the car and muttered, "I don't think there is anything wrong with the information given by Weasel, but even after searching so many places, I couldn't even see any traces of that island something guy." Derek wasn't sure if it was an intelligence error or the mistake of his shitty luck. At the end of the day, Derek had driven through almost the whole of New York, but he couldn't find the target. Following the last location given by the intelligence, Derek quickly found an apartment building and took the elevator to the floor where the target's location was said to be. In the elevator, Derek began to plan the action for his auspicious meeting with the target. "I don't exactly want to attract too much attention, especially from the gang behind Iwan," Derek thought in his mind. Derek's plan was super simple. He would find the target, follow him secretly, and then put a hole in his head when he gets to an empty place. It would be almost impossible to find the murderer. That would be him. Derek held the pistol in his hands and waited for the elevator door to open. Ding. When the elevator door opened, Derek's expression gradually froze. Several burly Russian men were standing right outside the elevator, holding guns in their hands. Among them was the target Derek was looking for, Iwan Karastov, standing in the center of the crowd with a silver box in his hands. They seemed to be waiting for the elevator, and when they saw Derek in the elevator, Iwan and the others were also taken aback. Gradually, their eyes rolled down, and their gaze fell on the pistol in Derek's hand. The time seemed to stand still. Derek coughed, pretending to be relaxed, and then said with a smile again, "If I were to say that I was just passing by, would you believe me?" "Get rid of him." It wasn't clear who yelled, but all the big men immediately raised their guns and shot at Derek. Bang bang bang. Faced with the intense gunshots, blood spattered out of Derek's body. The kinetic energy of the bullets drove him back. His whole body was soon stuck against the wall, and his limbs started to tremble. "Why always the wall?" Derek said in his mind as he felt his body get stuck to the wall again. Seconds later, the men finally ceased firing bullets. The strong smell of blood spread in the elevator. Looking at Derek, whose body was covered with bullet holes and blood sliding down while leaning against the wall, Iwan cursed, "Fuck, where did this idiot come from? Did he get some orders to kill me? Did I kill his family? Oh, or could it be that the other gangs know about a big deal tonight and sent someone to stop us? Oh, wait, no, they wouldn't be so stupid to send only one person. Never mind, he will die soon. Let's not forget the task Vladimir gave us and get out of here quickly." Iwan walked into the elevator, not paying any attention to the dead body in the elevator. He took the elevator to the first floor of the apartment building and didn't notice that Derek, who was supposed to be lying dead behind him, suddenly opened his eyes and stood up trembling. Derek's arm that was holding the pistol tightly rose slowly, aiming at the back of those people in the elevator. Gunshots rang and 5 people fell to the ground. Derek's attack being a surprise attack from behind and completely unexpected, combined with the small distance between everyone, made it easy for Derek's shots to be perfect. Only Iwan, with a horrified face, was left alive. The holes on Derek's body healed visibly as golden bullets were squeezed and thrown out by his body. The immortal characteristic of super high school level stuntmen is really good. The speed of my healing is even better than that of Wade and Wolverine, I think, Derek said as he was suddenly reminded of his new title's task. With that in mind, Derek glanced at the system panel. Unlock condition, kill 15 sinful villains, 1/15. What the? Derek had question marks all over his face. He obviously killed 5 gang members. Why did the system show the progress of only 1? After a few minutes of thinking, Derek could only get one reasonable conclusion, other than thinking that the system was moody. That is, among the 5 gang members he killed, there was only one person who truly met the condition of being a sinful villain. Not every gangster was a sinful villain. Thinking of this, Derek checked Iwan in front of him. Target does not meet the conditions. Derek's doubts were resolved, but his mood got more complicated. You know, Mr. Iwan in front of him is not like the 2 men before who didn't pay in the strip club. He had been involved in cases of transporting dangerous chemicals, selling firearms and weapons illegally, murder, arson. There was a thick stack of criminal records on his name. Any one of them could easily beat the record of the 2 gangsters from before. With this, Derek got into deep thinking. If Iwan, who had committed such crimes, was not meeting the conditions, how bad would those who would meet the condition be? And moreover, just what kind of a vicious criminal did he kill among those 5 for him to get 1/15 already? Chapter 13. Poor Derek. He was very sad right now. He originally thought that after a few entrustments, he would be able to unlock the new title, but he didn't expect the unlocking conditions to be so hard to meet. Including his target, only one of the dead gangsters was a certified good quality villain. Could it be that under their ferocious faces, there is still a shred of humanity left in their hearts? Ding! The elevator reached the first floor, and the elevator door slowly opened. Iwan's forehead kept breaking out in cold sweat. Although he really wanted to run out of the elevator, away from the monster in front of him, that could be resurrected after being killed by bullets. But Derek's eyes were completely fixed on him. Under Iwan's desperate gaze, Derek pressed the top floor button in the elevator. The 2 were locked in the elevator full of corpses again. Iwan swallowed and broke the silence. Comrade, you were most probably just passing by. We are from the Russian Ross gang. If you touch us anyways, I'll be forgiving and let you go this once. If you do anything more to me, only God can save you then. His words were somewhat threatening and warning, but his tone was extremely humble. Derek smiled and said, I am God. What? Iwan was astonished hearing what Derek said, but he felt that there might be some truth to it. He stood up again after being shot, so he might really. Derek walked up to Iwan and pointed the gun's muzzle at Iwan's forehead. Iwan raised his hands in the air, surrendering his fate for Derek to decide. Bang! Derek said loudly as he pushed Iwan's forehead using the gun, but did not pull the trigger. Iwan started shaking and sweating even more. His heart was beating so fast and loud that Derek could almost hear it standing amid the dead silence of the elevator. Seeing Iwan get scared so much from this tiny joke, Derek said, "Nothing, haha. Don't worry. I won't do anything to you. You just need to answer a few questions for me." Hearing his words, Iwan was shocked. Is this person really sent by some gang? Iwan had a slight hesitation before saying, "What's the deal?" Derek pointed at the 5 corpses on the elevator floor with his gun. "Which of them is the worst one?" Huh! Iwan was a little confused. This question was completely beyond his expectation. He had been expecting to be asked for some crucial information about the gang or something. They should be about the same. Impossible. Derek shook his head and denied that they were all equally bad. The 1/15 on his progress bar was the proof. Derek needed to find the worst one and see how thick was their criminal history to be recognized by the system as a real sinful villain, so that it will be easier for him to screen out suitable targets later. Before the elevator reaches the top floor, you have to find the worst one for me and report to me his criminal history. Derek raised his gun and pushed it against Iwan's forehead again. Now, this situation was even more difficult for Iwan. He did not know that these days, even criminals had to prepare their resumes. What a modern criminal world he was living in. Seeing that the elevator was about to reach the top floor, Iwan quickly pointed to a corpse and said, "It's him. He must be the worst one. He is a high-ranking officer and one of Vladimir's capable men. He has done a lot of dirty work for the gang over the years, and Vladimir entrusted him with this transaction. His criminal record, I can't find it so quickly. I need a few days for it." Derek became interested as soon as he heard it. "What transaction?" he asked. Iwan was speechless for a moment. He realized he said something that he shouldn't have said. Watching Derek put his finger on the trigger slowly, Iwan's heart skipped a beat. He moved his hand swiftly and opened the silver box that he had been holding, which turned out to be full of bags of shiny transparent crystals. Seeing the pile of small and particle crystals, as someone who knew a little about chemistry, Derek knew that those crystals were some crystalline chemicals. Combined with Iwan's identity, he concluded that these must be some illegal chemicals. This made Derek narrow his eyes slightly. No wonder when he came up, he saw a group of gangsters gathered in one place. It turned out that they were going to do some criminal activities. Wait, criminal activity? An idea suddenly popped up in Derek's mind. "Give me the box." Derek stretched out his hand, ordering Iwan to hand over the box, and leaving him with no room for negotiation. Iwan hesitated for a few seconds, but he finally gritted his teeth and handed the box over to Derek. "Oh, and since I'm not a thief," Derek fumbled in his trouser pocket twice and took out the 2 United States dollars bills and a 5-cent coin he got as change from the taxi driver. After thinking about it, he stuffed the banknote back and threw the 5-cent coin towards Iwan. "This is your payment for these crystals." Iwan looked at the 5-cent coin thrown by Derek and felt greatly humiliated. The muscles on his face twitched involuntarily as he forced a smile out on his face and said, "No need for this. The box is given to you for free." Derek's eyes became cold. "You think I'm poor? Do you think I'm the kind of person who doesn't pay in a strip club?" Iwan resisted the idea of picking up the gun on the ground and fighting Derek desperately. Derek wasn't going to die anyways. Iwan, being humble on the surface, picked up the coin forcefully. "Definitely not. How could I think so? Thank you so much for the payment. This is a fair and just transaction without any shady scenes." Derek corrected, "Paying only 5 cents in exchange for hundreds of thousands of my goods. And then this is called a deal with full fairness and justice without shady scenes." Iwan thought, but dared not speak out. He begged Derek to let him leave this elevator alive. He swore that as long as this matter was over, he would take the stairs all his remaining life. He now had received permanent trauma from elevators. Chapter 14. Ding. The elevator finally reached the top floor. "Well, can I go?" Iwan asked tentatively. Derek glanced at the game panel and wanted to try out something. He proceeded to take away all of Iwan's hopes to survive and said, "No way." Iwan's heart sank suddenly, his fist clenched subconsciously. But thinking of how Derek came back from the dead just now, he quietly let go of his fist, and after cursing racial slurs at Derek in his heart, he squeezed out a smile uglier than crying and said, "Why don't you just tell me whatever you want me to do? I will do my best to cooperate with you." "Okay. I like a straightforward person like you." Derek handed over the box he had just taken from Iwan back to him. "The box, it is for you." Huh? Iwan was confused and did not take the box. Seeing that Iwan didn't respond, Derek was not happy at all. "Why are you standing still? Pay me money for this, or do you want to not pay?" Well, Iwan couldn't keep up with Derek's messed up brain circuit, so he decided not to use his brain and obeyed Derek's words. Iwan then obediently returned the 5-cent coin to Derek. Derek glanced at the 5-cent coin in distaste and said, "Are you treating me as a beggar? Didn't you give this to me?" Iwan cursed secretly again, and then silently took out all the cash from his pockets. After he gave Derek all his cash, the silver box was returned to him. Derek accepted the cash with satisfaction and emphasized, "Remember, this is a fair and just transaction without any shady scenes." Iwan gave up using his brain completely. Now he just wanted to end all this as soon as possible, and go back home and sleep alone in his warm quilt. After making the 2 trades, Derek looked at the system again to detect Iwan. Target does not meet the conditions. Still not enough. Derek thought for a while, and then took out 1 note from the stack of banknotes. "Give me the box back again." Iwan was confused again, but as he had decided, he did not use his brain anymore, and just gave Derek the box. 2 minutes later, Derek looked at the system panel excitedly. The target meets the conditions. Iwan's results had changed. He was finally a good enough villain. And as Derek had thought, the focus of sinful villain is not on a villainous person at all. He need not be a gangster. The focus is on the word sin. According to Derek's inference from this, sin should refer to the illegal activities that a person has participated in. For example, gang members are often involved in criminal activities. The higher the status or the older the gang member has been a part of the gang, the more criminal activities they have participated in. When the sins on them accumulate to a certain level, they are the people recognized by the system as sinful villains. It's not the severity but the number of crimes that mattered. It's just that as a gang member who just recently joined, Iwan hadn't participated in many criminal activities yet. Therefore, Derek took the initiative to help Iwan improve his resume. The contents of the silver box were illegal items. No matter if he is the buyer or the seller, as long as each transaction is concluded, Iwan is considered to have committed a criminal activity, and he will have more sins. With the help of Derek, Iwan completed several illegal transactions in a short period, and his resume was now comparable to that of a senior gangster. Even Iwan himself wasn't aware of his evolution from a low-quality cheap villain to a truly sinful villain. Derek looked at the sinful villain with satisfaction and pulled the trigger. Bang! Title unlock condition. Kill 15 sinful villains, 2/15. A few hours later, at 1 o'clock in the morning, Derek changed his clothes and returned to the mercenary bar. Although it was already late at night for common folks, for some people, the night had just begun. Pushing open the rusty door, before Derek could take a few steps in, he heard the sounds of fierce fighting and all kinds of shouts and cheers. He saw 2 burly men fighting against each other, while a group of men surrounded them, watching their fight with interest. With a muffled sound, one of them was knocked down by his opponent after landing several punches. Immediately afterwards, Derek saw Weasel coming out of the crowd. He walked up to the unconscious man and checked his breathing and pulse. "He's still alive." Weasel turned his head and shouted loudly. As soon as the words fell, the crowd suddenly burst into annoyed sounds, as if someone was regretting that the man didn't die. As the owner of the bar, Weasel was not surprised to see everyone's reaction. After the excitement of the fight was over, everyone returned to their seats. Those who were drinking continued to drink, and those who were playing billiards continued to play. But none of them even tried to hide the bulging guns on their bodies. Weasel ordered a few people to carry the knocked-out man away, and then returned to the bar to wipe the glass leisurely. Derek came to the bar, put the silver box on the counter, took out his black card, and placed it in front of Weasel. Weasel looked up at Derek and asked, "The entrustment is finished already?" Derek nodded and took out the mobile phone he snatched from the first 2 gangsters he had met. "I took a photo of him too. Do I need to show verification?" "This is the best way. As long as the news is confirmed to be correct, you will immediately get the reward from the employer. I will also take 10% of the remuneration as a handling fee." Weasel put away the black card and continued, "As for the remaining remuneration, I will charge it to your account at that time. You'd better provide me with a bank account as soon as possible." so that I can directly deposit the money into your account. Quote, "Can I ask for cash?" Derek asked. He didn't even have a legal identity. Where would he get a bank account from? Yes, but there will be an additional fee then. As long as he can get cash, Derek doesn't care about these small fees. By the way, do you know any suitable rental house? I mean the one that doesn't require any identity proof. You know, my situation is similar to Wade's now. It's not good for people like Francis to notice me again. Derek found a suitable excuse to cover up his lack of identification in front of Weasel. Weasel didn't doubt Derek's words. He thought for a while and said, "I do have a vacant safe house. You should be able to live in it after tidying up a little. If you want to find a place to live, I can rent it out to you temporarily. Rent can be deducted from your remuneration of this entrustment." Hearing what the Weasel said, Derek replied cheerfully, "That's great. To thank you for your help, let me buy you a drink." Weasel looked Derek up and down and said, "Reminder, my rent is not cheap. Your money surely is not enough. Do you still have money to buy me a drink?" "Just drink. I have plenty of money. If it's not enough, you can take these 2 gold teeth." Derek boldly took out a stack of banknotes and 2 gold teeth from his pockets. Weasel looked at the 2 bloody gold teeth and at the wad of money, without asking where it all came from. Compared to these, Weasel was more curious about the silver box on the table. "I wanted to ask, what is inside this silver box?" "This is a training tool for criminals," Derek answered enthusiastically. "What?" "The villain's training tool. Through this, you can sin infinitely, and in just a few minutes, you can become a villain with a long criminal history." Derek seemed to have suddenly turned into a salesman, constantly promoting the benefits of his product. He then looked at Weasel with a hint of expectation in his eyes and said, "How about it? Do you want to try it?" Sensing Derek's gaze, Weasel felt a chill run down his spine for no reason. He trusted the gut feeling he had developed from running the bar for so many years, and decisively waved his hand, refusing Derek's offer. And like this, the birth of an innocent villain was avoided. Chapter 15. The next day, when Derek got the key from Weasel, he couldn't wait to reach the address, and came to an apartment building that looked quite old from the outside. This apartment was only 6 stories high, and most of the paint on the walls had peeled off. It was obvious that time had left its traces on this building. The streets were similar to the old buildings from the 1980s. Shops could be seen everywhere. Although they looked dilapidated, the environment seemed quite good. However, the geographical location of the area was quite special. The location was on the west shore of Manhattan Island, and a little further away from there was the infamous Hell's Kitchen. It is said that gang members there often visit the neighborhoods, but Derek doesn't care about this. After all, he has been in that lab for more than 2 months, and almost nothing can scare him anymore. Wade's face might, but nothing else. Derek walked into the apartment and found Weasel's house according to the door number. As Derek pushed open the door of his new house, a stale and decaying smell welcomed his nostrils. The old sofa with holes leaking cotton, the carpet covered with stains, the windowpane covered with old newspapers, and an ancient TV set really pervade a dilapidated atmosphere, which was in line with the atmosphere of this apartment building. It was obvious that Weasel hadn't cleaned the house for a very long time. Derek looked around the house and decided to throw away all these things, and then wash every other thing a few times before using it. Although he was not a fastidious person, he could not sleep on a bedsheet that had a thick layer of dust on it. Derek put down the silver box on a table and began to tidy up the house. For the next few days, Derek did not idle and regularly accepted commissions from Weasel. After solving the housing problem, he had a lot more time. With the help of the money sponsored by Iwan kindly, Derek could spend more time stepping on the spot in advance and locking the specific position of the target instead of being hasty and unprepared like last time. Definitely, Derek had not forgotten his most important task. That was to kill true sinful villains. If he couldn't find one, he would create one with the help of an almighty silver box. Have you heard that recently there appeared a strange man carrying a silver box, who was looking for trouble with different gangs everywhere? Your information has long been outdated. I have more details with me. It is said that the weirdo only targets junior gang members, and he has a very strange quirk. He likes to forcibly ask the other party to spend money to buy a silver box from him. What if I buy it? Here comes the important point. After the other party buys the silver box, That weirdo will buy the box back with a single banknote. Is he alright in the brain part? Haha, it's not over yet, because, after that, he will ask the other party to buy the box again and so on, until he gets tired of playing, and finally he shoots. For this reason, someone has already given him a nickname, the Box Demon. Author's note. Give me a better name please. I don't trust my naming sense. What exactly is he trying to do? Who knows? I think he's just a pervert who likes to torture people. In the mercenary bar, the conversation between two mercenaries was heard by Weasel. Weasel turned his head to look at the subject of the discussion and said with a complicated expression, I used to think that Wade was the most sadistic person, but I didn't expect you to be even more sadistic than him. Quote, Derek was drinking a bottle of energy drink when he heard Weasel slandering him so much. Derek immediately got unhappy. Don't talk nonsense, be careful. I will sue you for slander. There is no evidence with you. Why do you say that I'm the Box Demon? I'm not exactly blind. Weasel pointed at the black box on the bar table and said, you dangle a box in front of me all day. It's hard to pretend I didn't notice it. Derek retorted, I am a box demon because I carry a box. Besides, my box is black and the demon's box is silver. The color is not the same. I can smell the paint from far away. Weasel clutched his forehead, feeling a bit of a headache. I said, man, even if your eccentricity is perverted, can you at least pretend to be professional? At least you can change the box with something else like maybe a stick, and moreover, just changing the color does not help. More so when you bring it right after coloring it. You discovered all of this, amazing. Now that he was caught by Weasel, Derek simply stopped pretending. Derek did not expect that the news about him would spread so quickly, that he would have to use paint to change the color of the box to avoid revealing his identity. Fortunately, the results of his hard work until now were not bad. Title unlock condition. Kill 15 sinful villains. 7/15. Since that time with Iwan, Derek has tried his best to wait until the target is singled out. If there are too many targets, things would be difficult to control without getting shot. Even if he heals, the wound does cause pain first. Weasel pushed his glasses up and said with great interest, actually, it doesn't matter to me whether you are a box demon or not, but I have something to remind you. Recently, the Russian Ross gang has started to inquire about you around the area. It seems that it's because you took something valuable from them. Speaking of this, Weasel looked at the black box, and there was no need to say anything about the rest. How can gang affairs be regarded as robbery? I am safe keeping illegal items for them. Derek spoke uprightly. He couldn't return such a useful tool to the Russian Ross gang. He still needs to evolve the criminals and complete his progress bar. Also, just a lame joke from the chap. Derek, you are making fun of my box, right? Weasel, oh no, it's not like that. It's just that it is stupid and... Derek, oh, I received a lot of mixed opinions from people like you. Well, what color is your box? Chapter 16. Weasel looked at Derek speechlessly, thinking that Derek sitting in front of him was more thick-skinned than anyone else he had met his whole life. I've got what you want ready. With that said, Weasel took out a folder and put it in front of Derek. This is your new identity. This contains all your fake identity information, including a driver's license, medical records, social security number, etc. As long as you don't go provoking the IRS, under normal circumstances, there will be no problem. The IRS, short for America Tax Service. It was known as one of the most feared government departments in America. It is not wrong saying that in America, only death and taxes are inevitable. Derek couldn't help but feel a little worried. He shouldn't have to pay taxes on the things he robbed, right? But having said that, Weasel's business connections were at a really good level. A few days ago, he had collected enough money for another deposit, and then asked Weasel to forge a fake identity. It was all done quickly, which relieved Derek a lot. After all, he can't go anywhere without a legal identity. It will be convenient for him to move now. Derek put away the folder and suddenly asked, how is Wade doing these days? I don't know. The last I saw Wade was the day before yesterday. He was wearing blood-soaked clothes. He seemed to have found an underground force related to Francis, and then Weasel didn't go into too much detail. He shrugged and continued, anyways, he's been very busy these days. He has held back for such a long time, so he should find something to vent. Derek understood what Weasel meant. As Wade's bedmate, Derek knew how much torture Wade suffered during his time in the lab. Whether it was mentally or physically, Wade was already covered in ugly scars. If it weren't for Wade's firm will, maybe he would have already gone insane. Not to mention even Derek himself was a little different now. If it were him from before the torture, he would never have thought that he would take someone's life one day. After going through the soul-crushing torture in the lab, Derek's brain circuits changed completely. He wasn't a bloodlusted maniac, but he was not scared from becoming one either. He anyways decided to never kill without reason. However, Derek also knew that he was right now weak, and he cannot even take revenge on Francis. The super high school stuntman title just gave him a healing factor, but he didn't have any combat ability. If he was fighting an ordinary person, he could still use his self-healing ability to tire the opponent to death, but facing a mutant like Francis right now, he would only be beaten up one-sidedly. So, the best solution, for now, was to unlock the next title, with the help of the achievement system. Let's not talk about that. Just recommend a few new commissions to me, Derek said excitedly while clutching the black box. He was urgent to fight against the criminals. However, Weasel's answer was unexpected for Derek. There should be no commissions that can be completed with your abilities. Derek's expression froze instantly. Are you joking? Weasel then said helplessly, you should know that these commissions are all issued by employers, not me. Unless there is a real grudge, no one will waste money on dealing with these gangsters. Hearing what Weasel said, Derek was immediately disappointed. Originally, he was thinking of choosing the commission with the lowest difficulty, and completing the unlocking conditions of the title quickly. But now it seems that things are not going so smoothly. Now, Derek was 8 sinful villains' corpses far from completion. Thinking of this, Derek bewitched Weasel again. Do you really don't want to try my villain training box? It's very fun. Yeah, no, I kindly reject it. The muscles around Weasel's eyes twitched a few times. After listening to the conversation between the two mercenaries just now, he had already guessed what this villain's training box was used for. Okay, recommend me some commissions whose targets are gangsters. Derek sighed and gave up the tempting idea. Weasel quickly spread out several black cards. Derek picked them up one by one to have a look at them, and suddenly found a commission he was interested in. That's it. Derek pulled out the black card and said, I'll take this entrustment. Are you sure? Don't blame me for not informing you. This is pretty difficult. It's alright. I never fight a battle I know I will lose. By the way, I want to buy something from you. What? A bunch of C4 plastic explosives. The fog filled the night. On the streets of Brooklyn, a heavy truck was parked silently by the side of an empty road. Under the dim street lights, several burly men came out of the truck. They opened a rear compartment, and each took out an automatic rifle from inside. They didn't care about accidentally attracting the attention of others, and put one person guard there. The others just swaggered into the dark alley. The soles of the boots stepped heavily on the puddles on the road, mud and sewage splashed everywhere, dirtying their pants and streets even more. A strong man with an inferior quality cigar in his mouth flicked his trousers, cursed a few times in a low voice with a hard Russian accent, wiped off the water stains on the box in his hand, and then led the others to stop at an iron gate. From the looks of it, they should be in front of a frozen warehouse. The brawny man spat out the cigar from his mouth, reached out and knocked loudly on the iron door. After a while, a dull voice came from inside. Who? Vladimir sent us to take delivery. Hold on. Accompanied by the heart-piercing sound of metal rubbing, the somewhat rusty iron door was slowly opened from the inside. A group of Russian men walked in with guns in hand. The interior space of the warehouse was not large. Pieces of frozen pork were hanging in the air. There were already several people sitting around the metal table in the middle, playing poker with bored and grumpy faces. Seeing the arrival of the Russian men, they put down the cards in their hands. One of them stood up consciously and walked towards the frozen pork, took out a dagger from his waist, plunged into a piece of frozen pork, and cut it open. Through the incision, one can clearly see a pack of stuffed transparent crystals, all of which were sewn into the frozen pork. The goods are all here. The leader looked through the warehouse. There were about a dozen pieces of frozen pork. He then nodded in satisfaction. Immediately afterwards, he opened the box in his hand, and there were stacks of banknotes inside. Here it is. 20 million. Appearing to be the leader of the people in the warehouse, a man stepped forward to confirm the amount of the note. After confirming that it was all correct, he nodded, "Pleasant doing business with you." The Russian man grinned his mouth wide, and then waved his hand to signal his subordinates to take down all the frozen pork off the hooks. Knock. There was a sudden knock on the large iron door from outside. Chapter 17. This sudden sound of knocking stunned everyone in the warehouse and stopped their movements. The Russian men and the person in charge of the warehouse looked at each other, wanting to confirm whether they belonged to the other party. Within moments, they got the answer from each other's slightly shaking heads. The Russian man was the first to react and immediately raised his gun to the iron gate while asking in a loud, cold voice, "Who? If I were to say that I am just a passerby, would you believe me?" A voice came from outside the iron gate. The gangsters naturally wouldn't believe this sentence. The man stared at the iron gate and asked again, "Who the hell are you?" Except for the two gangs involved in the transaction, no one should come to this place. The man thought a little and concluded the outside person could only be another gang or the police. Others, who realized this, reacted one after another, imitating the man and pointing their guns at the door. As long as the people from the outside break in, they will be put to death's sleep without any hesitation. "I'm really just a passerby. Can we just sit down and talk? You motherfucker, get the hell out of here if you don't want to die." Accompanied by the heart-piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other again, the iron door that was locked just now slowly opened. Immediately afterwards, a figure appeared in front of them. "Good evening, everyone. It's so lively here." Facing the black muzzle, Derek smiled and greeted everyone in the warehouse. At that moment, everyone's eyes were on Derek. They all saw a C4 explosive tied to Derek's jacket, and the red light on it was constantly flashing with a regularly beeping sound, shocking everyone present. The strong Russian Ross gang and the others had cold sweat on their foreheads. They didn't dare to pull the trigger. No matter whether the bomb in front of them was real or not, they didn't dare to take the risk of their life. Where did this maniac come from? After a moment of silence, the boss from the Russian gang took a deep breath and took 2 steps forward abruptly. "We are the Russian Ross gang. Do you know what the consequences of doing this are?" Derek didn't answer in a hurry, but walked into the warehouse, then turned around and closed the iron door, shutting himself and others inside. Now, no one doubted anymore that the bomb was fake. Otherwise, the opponent would never have cut off his retreat like this, and put himself directly in danger. Feeling Derek's madness at this moment, even the gang members who had seen many maniacs felt a chill down their spine, and their throats got dry. The person in charge of the warehouse looked at the Russian boss and said in a low voice, "Damn, this guy wouldn't happen to be an enemy of your Russian Ross gang, right?" The boss glared at him and said, "Us? No, we don't know him. Isn't he your enemy?" "I don't know him either." While talking, Derek walked up to them and said, "Let's sit down and talk calmly. Who are you and what is your purpose?" The Russian boss said, "I've already told you. I'm a mere passerby." Derek looked around and said helplessly, "By the way, can you stop pointing your guns at me? It's scary, and if my heartbeat rate exceeds 120, the bomb will detonate." "What?" Hearing Derek's words, everyone's face suddenly turned pale, and the beep sound seemed to be a reminder. "All put down the guns, all guns down." The person in charge of the warehouse quickly put down the guns and shouted at everyone to do the same. It seemed that he was afraid that his volume would scare Derek, so he lowered the volume very thoughtfully. The strong Russian man froze, but he managed to pull a smile and said, "You seem very reasonable. We really should sit down and talk calmly. After all, you are the guest now." Seeing the brawny man pointing at himself, the head of the warehouse twitched his mouth. Due to the unexpected situation in front of him, the person in charge of the warehouse could only swallow his pride and do what he was asked to. Pride is not important. The most important thing right now was to ensure that the heart rate of the madman strapped to a bomb would not exceed 120. Surrounded by the two gangs, Derek sat down at the metal table in the center. The person in charge of the warehouse brought a cup of coffee to Derek, trying to persuade Derek, "Mister, why don't you take this bomb off first? Let's talk after that. In fact, I think its design is a bit wrong too. The value of 120 is too low. I'm afraid that if you get a little excited during the deal, all our people will." "Indeed." The Russian man nodded, expressing his agreement. Derek slammed the table and stood up. "This is the explosion mechanism I worked so hard to make, and you guys doubt its quality. Seems like you don't want to talk with me." At the same time, the red light of the bomb on his body flickered wildly, and the sound of beeps became rapid. Seeing this, the surrounding gangsters were so frightened that they threw away the pork and quickly lay on the ground with their heads tucked in their arms. As for the two junior bosses, they were people who have seen the world after all. They forcibly suppressed the instinctive reaction of hugging their heads on the ground, and immediately proceeded to comfort Derek. "Don't take us wrong. Take a deep breath. We were just suggesting." The head of the warehouse began to shake his legs. "Yes," the Russian man quickly agreed. "That's all right. Say that earlier. I'm not the kind of person who refuses to listen to suggestions." Derek rubbed his hair shyly and returned to his seat as the sound of beeps became steady again. Seeing this, the Russian man and the person in charge of the warehouse breathed a sigh of relief, but their mood also fell to the bottom. After the scene just now, they were convinced of the bomb's explosion mechanism. As long as the heartbeat of the madman exceeds 120 boom. Chapter 18. As the Russian man and the head of the warehouse watched Derek, they realized that he had gone beyond ruthless to complete lunacy. While ruthless criminals usually only threatened with bombs, expecting to go down together in a big deal, a lunatic was different. Derek was now strapped with a bomb that he couldn't even control, and he seemed to have no regard for his own life or the lives of those around him. They were completely unsure of what Derek would do next, and this uncertainty gnawed at their hearts, making them reluctant to take any action until they understood his true motives. Terrified by Derek's unpredictable behavior, the two small-time bosses abandoned any plans of dismantling the bomb. They knew that they were dealing with someone completely unhinged, and they were not willing to take any unnecessary risks. The Russian boss then spoke up. "Now that we've had a chance to sit down and talk, may I ask, what business brings you here?" Derek shrugged the matter off his shoulders casually and said, "Oh, nothing in particular. I was just taking a walk and happened to pass by. I got curious about the warehouse and decided to check it out." Ross and the warehouse head exchanged incredulous looks. How could anyone nonchalantly take a stroll around with a C4 bomb strapped to their body? Ignoring their expressions, Derek gestured to the gang members around him and said, "Don't worry about me. Just go about your business and pretend I'm not here. When you're finished, I'll leave on my own." One of the boys from the Russian gang then spoke up, "But the deal was over a long time ago." "Then, let's trade again," Derek said, crossing his legs and speaking with an air of authority. "You'll inspect the goods for me, and you will count the money. Make sure to keep your eyes open and double-check everything. If there are any issues or discrepancies, I'll settle the score with you." The two warehouse men who were tasked with inspecting the goods exchanged nervous glances with each other, while the Russian gang's boys assigned to count the money looked at their leader for guidance. When Derek announced that he would leave, the Russian man gritted his teeth and gave his subordinates the order to count the money. The warehouse head took a few deep breaths before ordering his men to inspect the goods. The tension in the room was palpable. Each member was acutely aware of Derek's presence and the danger of the bomb that he carried with him. Seeing that the real boss had spoken, the subordinates reluctantly obeyed, going through the motions of inspecting the goods and counting the money for Derek. However, Derek was not fooled by their superficial actions. He paid close attention to every detail in the warehouse. Suddenly, he pointed at one of the warehouse men and erupted in fury. "Who do you think you're fooling? Do you think I'm blind? I bet you're an undercover gang member. Well, I'm going to take care of you right now." Derek stood up, the red light on his chest flickering faster and faster. The other gang members all backed away in fear. The gangsters threw away the pork and money and fell to the ground with their heads covered in fear again. "Mister, forgive them, please. They are just some youngsters." The two little bosses scrambled to placate Derek, pleading with him to forgive their young subordinates. But Derek was not in the mood for forgiving. "This person looks like an undercover agent of some gang," he shouted, his anger mounting. "How can I trust anything that's been counted or inspected by criminals like him?" The person in charge of the warehouse stood up suddenly and grabbed the innocent man, raining blows down on him in front of Derek. The poor warehouse boy crumpled to the ground, unconscious and battered. "You're right. He was an undercover agent of the gang," the warehouse boss said coolly. "Now that the matter is settled, let's continue with the transaction." The warehouse head just wanted to get rid of the madman in front of him, and he even mumbled an apology to his passed-out lackey. "Yes, boss," the gangsters yelled. Derek gave a thumbs up as the red light slowed down again. With the lesson learned, the subordinates did not dare to perfunctory Derek. At least on the surface, they checked the goods and money carefully, and from time to time they sighed. "It's real goods, it's real money, and it's real pork," lest Derek couldn't see how serious they were. Back in his seat, Derek grabbed the poker cards lying on the metal table, as if nothing had happened recently. While they are checking everything, why not play cards? "How about the 3 cards game?" Derek suggested. Derek briefly introduced the rules of a game he created himself, and the two quickly understood how to play. Immediately afterwards, Derek proposed to play more excitingly, using 1,000 United States dollars as the basic chip. Although none of the two was interested under Derek's oppression, they accepted the untimely proposal. Derek won the first 2 rounds. The Russian man and the warehouse man paid Derek without any negotiation. Their minds were not focused on the game, but on their own subordinates. Seeing their subordinates suddenly stop their movements, their originally dull eyes lit up. "Look, the inspection is over." The two hurriedly called Derek, who was counting the money. Derek put away all the banknotes he had won in his pockets, and glanced at them casually. "Oh, then have you made the deal?" "Yes, we are all very satisfied. It was all really good." The two nodded. The Russian man tentatively asked, "According to our agreement, you have to leave now, or, if you want, we can be the ones to leave." The person in charge of the warehouse glared at him fiercely. The Russian man was throwing this lunatic at him. "Actually, that's true." Derek nodded and then changed his voice. "But our interesting card game has just started. We can't be disturbed by such trivial things. Let them continue to inspect the goods and make a deal again. If you don't win at least 20 rounds, no one will leave today." Chapter 19. Get it. Even, right? No, it's odd, I think. Sorry, it's 4 9s. I win again. Derek hummed a ditty, looked at the last card in his hand, and then looked at the 6 cards in the Russian man's hands, and couldn't help showing a smug smile. Just as Derek was about to play a card, the Russian man played 4 10s with no expression on his face. Got it. ... Derek's heart started beating faster. He felt that he was about to lose this game of cards now. The red light on his chest flickered and the sound began to run rampant. Standing around them, the subordinates dropped the pork and banknotes in their hands without saying a word, and then skillfully lay on the ground with their heads tucked in their arms. The warehouse man glared at the Russian man. "Are you trying to kill us?" The corner of the Russian man's mouth twitched. He didn't expect this to be the case. Looking at the remaining pair of 5s in his hand, the Russian man finally reluctantly played a card. "Damn, a piece of 5. Derek glanced at the last card in his hand and closed his eyes in despair. "Sorry," Derek mumbled. Beep beep beep. The voice resounded crazily, like the crooning of Death God. The warehouse man hurriedly played his cards and shouted, "A 2 and then a 3. A 4, I won, give me my money, give me money." The warehouse man said, even though he knew that he lost. Derek turned from sorrow to joy, and finally played the last card, as the tense nerves of the two of them got relaxed. For some reason, the warehouse man suddenly had the feeling that he saved the world at a critical moment. Under Derek's urging, the 2 junior bosses took out the money from their pockets silently. Looking at the large pile of banknotes in front of Derek, the two felt exhausted. For the first time in their life, they felt that losing money was more difficult than winning. They were afraid that if Derek won too big by accident, his heart rate would soar over 120, and then, seemingly reminded of something, the Russian man suddenly became excited and asked, "Isn't this the 20th inning?" "Yes." The warehouse man's eyes lit up. "Well, it's almost done." Derek put away the banknotes on the table and glanced around. "It seems that their work over there is also over. If there is no problem, then let's wind up with the 5th transaction." The 2 bosses looked at each other tacitly and said in unison, "It was a happy cooperation. Target meets the conditions. In this case, I should go too." Derek stood up and stretched his body. Hearing his words, everyone in the warehouse burst into ecstasy. The lunatic obsessed with cards was finally leaving. The 2 bosses tried their best to suppress the idea of celebrating on the spot, and immediately followed Derek towards the gate. Derek opened the iron gate and looked at the two bosses reluctantly and said, "Just stay here. No need to come with me or be sad, everyone had a good time tonight. Though, I didn't expect to say goodbye so soon and be alone again. Everyone had fun." Fortunately, the people present had adapted to the situation, and they were able to keep their expressions from showing up on their faces. Anyway, this lunatic is leaving, and they don't care what he says anymore. Looking at the silent crowd, Derek comforted them. "I know you don't want me to, but I still have to go. For the sake of getting to know each other, I will give you all a precious gift." As he spoke, Derek yanked off the bomb on his body. "This is a bomb I carefully designed, and it's a gift for you. Have a nice day with the Death Goddess." Under everyone's horrified gazes, Derek directly dropped the bomb at their feet. The next moment, he turned around and ran away. Boom! The sudden explosion shattered the peacefulness of the street, sending shockwaves through the air and causing car alarms to blare. The once tranquil street had been transformed into a scene of devastation and chaos. Before Derek even ran a few steps, he felt a huge shockwave coming from his back, throwing his body into the air and falling in a distance. After a few seconds, Derek got up from the ground as the buzzing sound in his head gradually weakened. He then took out several sharp pieces of iron that were squeezed into his back. Derek turned his head to look at the warehouse, where there was already a huge fire as thick smoke rushed into the sky. "It's so nice." Derek sighed and took out a controller from his pocket, which was the real switch of the bomb. A bomb that detects heartbeat frequency beating. That was all a lie he made up to scare the gangsters. Was it really a lie? Perhaps he had concocted the story as a way to scare them into following his orders. Or maybe he was taking a dangerous gamble, testing the limits of his immortality. It's a pity that I can't get the 20 million though. Even if Derek would threaten with bombs, those gangsters would never hand over 20 million or that batch of goods. That was the opponent's bottom line. Thinking of this, Derek touched and felt his full pockets. There was probably more than 100,000 United States dollars that he won from playing poker with the two junior bosses. "Fortunately, I was able to cheat them out of a significant sum of money before I left," Derek chuckled to himself. He paused for a moment, reflecting on his actions before continuing down the street, his voice echoing through the empty alleyway as he began to sing a tune. As he walked, he couldn't help but wonder what his past self would think of his current behavior. Perhaps he would be scared of himself too. But at this moment, Derek couldn't bring himself to feel remorseful. The thrill of his actions just now still coursed through his veins, filling him with a weird sense of satisfaction that he couldn't just ignore. Chapter 20. After solving the matter with the gangsters, Derek walked into the alley without stopping. The heavy truck belonging to the Russian Ross gang was still parked on the street. However, the Russian Ross gang member who stayed outside the truck has disappeared. Just when Derek was about to step out of the alley, a black thing suddenly fell from the sky and landed in front of Derek. Derek frowned slightly and stopped walking. All he saw was a distorted corpse in front of his eyes. It was the disappeared Russian Ross gang member. His corpse was in a terrible state, with bloody scars all over his body, and a thin steel wire tied to his limbs, as if he had been hung on a street lamp. According to Derek's recent experience, those scars should be the traces left by the cruel torture suffered recently. Tread, tread. Heavy footsteps sounded in the darkness as a burly black figure stepped out of the shadows. As the black figure approached him, Derek could clearly see that it wasn't an alien, but rather, he was a tall man with unusually protruding nasal bones, and the contours of his face hidden in the shadow looked extremely oppressive. He was wearing black short sleeves and a thick cloak, the bulletproof vest with a huge pale skull printed on it. Seeing this iconic attire, Derek immediately recognized the identity of the person in front of him without thinking any further. Frank Castle, codenamed the Punisher. Although he was a soldier from the Marine Corps, he was also an experienced expert in unconventional warfare. However, his family was implicated in the gang fight, and unfortunately, all of them died painfully. Since then, he has become the Punisher and deals with all evil forces by himself, to retaliate, using means that are extremely bloody and brutal. Although Frank doesn't have any supernatural abilities, his fighting skills were definitely enough to make up for it. This man was the real god of killing. Frank's style of doing things was very similar to Wade. The only difference between them was that Frank did not like bullshit. "Son, you shouldn't be in this dangerous alley at this time." A hoarse and deep voice sounded, and Frank slowly walked out of the shadows. His pupils were filled with cold light, and a strong smell of blood seemed to permeate his clothes. He held a dagger in his right hand, and blood kept dripping down from the dagger blade. Compared with this 1.9-meter strong man, the thin Derek does look like a child in front of him. It may be because Danganronpa's game character is a high school student. After Derek traveled through worlds, his age also returned to 18 years old, which happened to be the age of a final year high school student. For Frank, Derek really was just a child. "Tell me, what happened to the warehouse?" Frank said in a deep voice. Derek pondered for a few seconds and finally replied honestly, "We were playing cards. They didn't expect that I would detonate the bomb. I did it and the whole warehouse was blown up." Frank frowned, unable to understand Derek's meaning at all. In fact, he had not been here for a long time. He had just caught a gang member from the Russian Ross gang outside. After passing an unconventional interrogation, he heard a loud explosion in the warehouse. Originally, Frank planned to lurk nearby, waiting for the gangsters to appear. Unexpectedly, after waiting for a while, only a young boy appeared in the alley. Frank knew that in the deepest part of the alley was the warehouse, and the boy in front of him definitely had a lot to do with that explosion. "Be clear." Frank walked up to Derek and asked again, "Can't you see that?" Derek shook the remote control in his hand and said cheerfully, "Obviously. I blew up that place. You may be late though, those gangsters have already been dealt with by me. Now, only their ashes remain." Hearing his words, Frank was very surprised. "Who are you?" "Just a passerby," Derek said without changing the cheerful expression on his face, while secretly getting ready to guard himself against Frank. In fact, he wasn't sure if this god of death, who advocated more violent solutions to violent problems, would attack him. Frank took a look at Derek, then wiped off the blood on the dagger, showing no intention of making a move. After his observation, the boy in front of him was not in his range of hunting. Although Frank has never been a soft-hearted person, he still has his own set of morals. He still has a certain tolerance for young people, and moreover, the dead were all damned gangsters anyways. Frank didn't speak, turned and walked out of the alley. However, Frank soon stopped. Derek followed his line of sight, and not far away were several big black jeeps rushing towards them. Accompanied by the screeching sound of tires rubbing against each other, the convoy stopped in front of them, and more than a dozen heavily armed men got out of the car, their eyes fixed on Derek and Frank's positions. Derek immediately shrank and hid behind Frank while saying seriously, "Be careful, they are coming for us." Frank glanced back at Derek. "What is us?" "It was clearly aimed at you." Chapter 21. Run. Frank was never one to be indecisive. He knew what was being implicated the moment he saw a dozen armed gangsters turn up. Without hesitation, Frank immediately turned around and rushed into the alley. Derek hurriedly followed behind Frank. He didn't want to face so many armed forces alone. As said before, even if his wounds heal, they do hurt. The two returned to the alley, bypassed the location of the warehouse, and fled outside from the fork. The sound of chaotic footsteps followed them closely, like a group of rabid dogs who just saw flesh and were biting it tightly, not letting it go. This small and gloomy environment provided people with a crippling sense of suffocation. Suddenly, Frank, who was running at the front, seemed to have noticed something as his face turned cold. He took out a Browning automatic pistol from his waist and put on a standard shooting posture towards the front. Right at that moment, several sneaking figures came out of the shadows and blocked their way. The attackers did not expect Frank's reaction to be so swift. Before they raised their own guns to aim, Frank pulled the trigger at an extremely fast speed. Bang, bang, bang. The Browning automatic pistol modified by Frank made a terrifying sound. The shell case jumped out of the gun with the smoke on its muzzle as the bullet head burst out, tearing the heads of the attackers in an instant. The roaring gunshots echoed in the narrow alley, making people nearby feel as if their eardrums were tearing apart. These gunshots seemed to announce the start of a big war. A dozen gangsters rushed over from behind, and the automatic rifle in his hand frantically fired ammunition at the two of them. The dazzling firelight illuminated the surrounding dark alley beautifully in Derek's opinion. Facing the ferocious rain of bullets, Derek and Frank immediately retreated into the recesses of the walls on both sides. The gangsters' firepower instantly suppressed them, making them unable to move. What was even worse in that situation was the sound of footsteps coming from the exit again. Those dozen armed gangsters were not the only ones surrounding them. Derek quickly took a bold step and looked outside, and found that he and Frank were surrounded by several gangsters. He then quickly retracted his head to not get shot in the forehead. He looked at Frank on the opposite side and asked loudly, "What's a plan? You are a kid, so maybe you don't realize. But next is get out of here alive." "This plan sounds plausible," Derek replied, his sound barely audible to Frank under the deafening gunshots aimed at them. Each bullet that would land near them would chip off small parts of the wall. Derek quickly took out a little pistol. He feels like he should have prepared a few more C4 bombs earlier. Immediately afterwards, Frank took out a smoke bomb and threw it on the ground. The thick smoke covered the surrounding areas, and the already dark alley became very cloudy and foggy. Hearing the gunshots outside pause, Frank immediately rushed out, followed by Derek, who seemed more reckless and didn't care as much as Frank even if a bullet accidentally injured him. Author's note. Damn, is Derek immortal or something? In the smoke, the gangsters blocking the front suddenly noticed two figures rushing towards them. "Fuck, they're here dash." Before his words were finished, a few golden bullets instantly tore open their heads and stopped the remaining words in their mouths. Before one of the gangsters who survived by chance had time to rejoice, Frank pounced on him like a bloodthirsty beast, grabbed his neck with his powerful palm, pressed the muzzle of the gun directly to his jaw, and pulled the trigger. White concretion splashed out from the top of his head as if his brain splashed out. As expected of the Punisher, he's really savage. Derek sighed in his heart and suddenly felt the sound of tearing air hit his ears. The butt of a gun hit him hard on the head. Derek swayed forward but did not fall down. When he turned his head to look, he saw a black hole of a gun's muzzle appear in front of his eyes. Bang! A trace of white smoke came out of the gun, and a man looked at Derek in astonishment. He saw that Derek maintained the posture of falling backwards, but stopped strangely halfway, as if he suddenly tensed his body to forcibly resist the momentum of the bullet, putting up a strange half-bent posture. But I obviously shot him in the head. How could he still be standing? At this moment, Derek's body in front of him slowly straightened up once again. Under the man's horrified gaze, Derek smiled like a maniac, as the blood from his wound dripped down after stroking his lips. "Oh my, by any chance, are you surprised?" After speaking, Derek raised his gun and returned a bullet to the terrified man. The man wanted to imitate Derek's astonishing maneuvers, but failed and fell down neatly. "Come on, try it once. Can you be as good as me?" Derek said as he sat down and hit the man on his cheeks a few times. Disappointed in his failure to stand up, Derek turned his head and found that Frank, who had already eliminated all his opponents, was looking at him. Frank just glanced at him coldly and didn't say much. Before the smoke cleared out from the alley, the two finally tried to run out of the alley again. Suddenly there was another roar of engines in the alley. Two gangsters rushed in on a motorcycle. The man sitting behind raised a submachine gun and fired at the two. The intention to keep them inside the alley was extremely strong. At this moment, Frank couldn't help wondering, what exactly did Derek do to make these gangsters go so crazy? In fact, even Derek didn't know what exactly he had done other than killing some low-level youngsters and taking a training tool. In a short period, many people gathered to encircle and suppress the two. "I didn't blow up their lair by mistake, did I?" Chapter 22. On the other side, at the ex-frozen warehouse, deep in the alley, the flames had been extinguished and the twisted rusty iron door lay quietly on the ground in the distance. There was only a huge black crater on the spot where the warehouse's original door was. Several gangsters with loaded guns walked into the frozen warehouse quickly, only to see charred corpses and guns everywhere in the warehouse. The gangsters' limbs and pieces of pork meat were scattered all over the floor, making it difficult to differentiate between them. A man looked at the ruins and finally found something. He immediately walked to the corner and turned a corpse over. What came into view was a severely burned and charred face. Through the contours and features of the face, the men could barely recognize him, but they somehow confirmed that he was the man they were looking for. Suddenly, his expression changed drastically and his hands trembled uncontrollably. This was the last thing he wanted to see happening. Realizing the seriousness of the matter, the man took out his mobile phone and made a call. "Vladimir, There was a serious problem with the trading place tonight. There was an explosion in the warehouse. All the people in Jinbin died and none of our people survived. Your brother Anatoly died too. After speaking, there was no response from the other end of the phone. The man didn't dare to hang up the phone. He waited patiently for any order he might receive. Finally, a hoarse voice came from the phone. Who is it? The man replied while trembling slightly. When we arrived at the scene, we found two suspicious people. They were probably the ones who caused the explosion. Catch them for me even if it costs you your life. The uncontrollable roar broke out suddenly, interrupting the man's words in the middle. Even through the phone, the man could still feel Vladimir's monstrous anger as Vladimir yelled at him through the phone like crazy. Send everyone out. Those two damn murderers must be caught. I want them fucking alive. I fucking want them alive in front of me. Accompanied by a loud bang from the other end of the phone, there was a busy tone coming on the phone. The man put away the phone with lingering fear. He knew that this time, the matter had become very much serious. The person in charge of this transaction was Vladimir's younger brother. The death of his younger brother Anatoly drove the leader of the Russian Ross gang completely crazy. The man took a deep breath and then ordered the others. Call all the members of the gang. We must catch those two quickly. Also, remember, regardless of what Vladimir just said, you all have to live and capture them alive. Deafening and dense gunshots sounded in the small alley as Derek pulled the trigger continuously against the continuous bullet rain. In the face of a fast-moving motorcycle and a machine gun, his gun's muzzle was a tad bit bad, and the bullets just flew in random directions, proving that his aim had not improved very much since his escape from the lab. While all his shots missed, the opponent's bullets hit him precisely. Taking advantage of Derek acting as a meat shield in front of him, Frank calmly raised the muzzle of his gun and killed the gangster holding a submachine gun with one accurate shot. Regardless of the oncoming motorcycle, Frank hit the driver with another shot. Bam! The out-of-control motorcycle fell to the ground, coasted a few meters away, and hit the wall laterally. At that moment, the smoke in the alley began to dissipate, and the gangsters made their way inside again. Go check the bike, Frank growled. He quickly changed the clips, took Browning and fired wildly into the alley to hold back the pursuers. Derek understood what Frank meant and immediately ran to the motorcycle. After the impact just now, the surface of the motorcycle was slightly damaged, but fortunately, the important parts were not damaged. Derek set up the motorcycle and sat in the driver's seat. Frank backed away towards Derek while shooting the gangsters in the alley. While counting the number of bullets remaining in his magazine, Frank turned and sat on the rear seat of the motorcycle just before his magazine was emptied. However, Derek did not drive immediately. Derek turned his head in embarrassment and looked at Frank. Sorry, I forgot to mention this, but I don't seem to have driven a motorcycle before. Frank, ... Frank was really a tough guy. In the face of this situation, he could still maintain a deadpan-like expression. Then, he asked a very vital question. If you can't drive, why did you even sit in the front seat? Instinctive reaction, I guess. The gangsters in the rear had already caught up. The two had no time to change positions. Frank gritted his teeth and roared, just drive. Hearing Frank's roar, Derek stopped hesitating and twisted the accelerator handle suddenly. The roar of the engine suddenly sounded through the alley, making it super noisy once again. The motorcycle started instantly with a whoosh, the strong inertia of rest almost threw Frank behind. In less than a second, the motorcycle rushed onto the road, directly throwing off the group of gangsters. Just step on the accelerator and leave the rest to God. At the moment, Derek can be said to have brought this sentence into full play. Because Derek was almost blinded by the strong wind, he instinctively twisted the grip of the motorcycle down to full. Frank, in the rear seat, was holding onto the small armrest of the motorcycle. It seemed that there was only the whistling wind in his ears, as Frank looked at the scenery changing very quickly. Even someone mentally strong like Frank couldn't control his fast heartbeat at this moment. To be honest, Frank regretted it a bit. I'd have higher chances of surviving if I just fought them all alone. Chapter 23. Vroom. In the dead of night, a motorcycle was speeding down the driveway in Brooklyn. Derek was driving the motorcycle, letting the strong wind blow on his cheeks, grasping the handlebars of the motorcycle with both his hands. With the roar of the engine, It was known that the speed of the motorcycle had almost reached the maximum speed. He had almost used the whole speedometer. Even at such a speed, when the motorcycle was driven steadily on the road, it was not at all obvious that the driver was a novice who had just started a few minutes ago. Frank gradually adapted to the current speed and shouted loudly, "Haha, you were lying, kiddo. You can drive and you are very good at it." The wind in their ears made it difficult for them to hear other voices clearly. They couldn't hear anything unless they were loud enough. "I really don't know how to drive. Maybe this is my God-sent talent," Derek also yelled. Derek was not lying. He had never driven a motorcycle. Even in his past life, he couldn't get a license for a motorcycle. As for cars, there is no need to say anything anymore. But for some reason, when Derek touched the motorcycle's handles moments ago, he felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. So he subconsciously sat in the driver's seat. Derek had been slowly becoming more and more proficient in the operation of riding a motorcycle. Compared to the panic at the beginning, he had become much calmer now. He feels as if he is not controlling a bike but his own limbs. With such an unbelievable ability, Derek quickly thought of the only super high school level talent he had. The super high school level stuntman. Because the powerful immortal characteristic was too dazzling, Derek had been ignoring the rest of the description of this talent. A stuntman who does all the dangerous stunts. Stunt is the real job, immortality is just an additional benefit. These two characteristics made Derek think of one person. One was also a character in the Marvel world, Jonathan Blaze, who was a motorcycle stunt driver on the surface, and Ghost Rider behind the back. Compared with Jonathan Blaze, Derek feels that his talent is more inclined to the immortal part than wait, he's also. Meanwhile, Frank didn't believe Derek's words at all. If he was the one driving at this speed, he might not be able to drive as smoothly as Derek right now. At this time, Frank glanced at the corner and saw a black Jeep appear ahead. "They are catching up. Don't get hit," Frank reminded Derek loudly. Derek also saw the Jeep appear, and judging from the opponent's route, it is obvious that they want to block their way. "Hold on," Derek roared. Not only did he not slow down the speed, but he rather increased the speed even more. Seeing that the Jeep ahead was getting closer and closer, Derek adjusted the center of gravity of his body, pulled the steering handle of the motorcycle with all his force, and tilted the entire body on the ground. Relying on the strong centrifugal force, the motorcycle drifted sideways against the Jeep at an unbelievable angle. Frank in the back seat could even feel the stern wind from the Jeep brushing against his cheek while passing against it. Derek then stabilized the motorcycle again, passed the Jeep and turned to the left. The whole process was thrilling but also dangerous. If you are not careful while doing it, you will end up meeting Mr. Walker up in the sky. Author's note. RIP. How are my driving skills? Derek asked proudly. It's okay, a little bit fancy, but it's fine. Frank's face was tense and as cold as a Terminator at the same time. It was difficult to see the tension in his expression. However, the remaining guys are coming. Derek looked forward. Several Jeeps emerged from both sides of the driveway. One by one, the gangsters leaned most of their bodies out of the car windows, holding rifles, ready to shoot at the motorcycle. Derek cursed angrily and immediately dodged a car with some swift left and right movements. The motorcycle twisted like a snake, making it difficult for the gangsters to lock their positions. Frank didn't say anything. He released both hands to change the magazine of the Browning, and then raised his gun to return fire at the Jeep convoy. Soon he hit the windshield of a Jeep and the car lost control, crashing into the wall nearby. Bang! A shot was fired as Frank let out a suppressed muffled groan. Derek took a look back, only to see Frank clutching his left arm with blood gushing from between his fingers. "Are you all right?" Derek asked with some concern. "Concentrate on riding." Frank growled and continued to pull the trigger with his right arm, killing several more gangsters. And with that, the last magazine was also emptied. "You seem to be seriously injured." Derek's voice came again. "I said, concentrate." Frank turned and stared, only to be stunned on the spot. Derek was also facing Frank, lowering his head as if studying the extent of his right arm injury, completely ignoring the road ahead with only one hand on the motorcycle. But that didn't make Frank even a little bit better. "Fuck. What the fuck are you doing?" Frank couldn't stand it anymore. He couldn't maintain that iron-blooded tough guy anymore. His roar almost overwhelmed the gunshots. "Didn't you see? I'm driving nicely." Derek looked up at Frank. "Don't worry, One hand is more than enough to drive. Derek took out his pistol, grinned and said, "As for those guys, Borhaha, leave it to me." Derek then looked in front of him at the system panel and smiled. Title obtained successfully. Title: Super High School Level Sharpshooter. Explanation: the bullet turns. The moment the bullet gets out of the chamber, the shooter shakes his wrist rapidly to give the bullet a horizontal acceleration, thus forming an arc. This is a very helpful and precise shooting technique. Characteristic: bullet time. Derek then looked at the gangsters in front of him and mumbled while maintaining his warm smile, "You're all fucked." Chapter 24. Bullet time. The iconic power from the classic gunfight movie, Wanted, echoed in Derek's mind as he was granted the powerful skill. His pupils dilated and a surge of adrenaline rushed through his veins, leaving him breathless. At that moment, he knew that everything was about to change. He was no longer an ordinary skill-less immortal. As Derek embraced his newly acquired power, he could feel his heart pounding fiercely within his chest, like a violent drum beating to a rhythm of its own. The sound was deafening, yet strangely empowering. It was as if his heart had transformed into a high-power engine, providing him with an endless supply of energy for any physical activity. His blood raced through his veins at an incredible pace, fueling every muscle in his body. Derek was no stranger to this feeling. He has experienced it countless times in the Research Institute. He knew that this was the body's natural response to being stimulated to secrete adrenaline in normal conditions. It was now just happening on a more extreme level. Derek's heart rate had skyrocketed, surpassing an astounding 400 beats per minute. He felt as if the 120 heart rate for the C4 detonation was nothing now. With the secretion of a massive amount of adrenaline, Derek entered a state of euphoria. His senses were extremely heightened, and everything around him seemed to slow down. The world became more vivid, colors more vibrant, and sounds more distinct. His eyes focused with laser-like precision as if they were frozen in time, taking in every detail with stunning clarity. In this state, Derek's thinking became extremely active. His mind was capable of processing vast amounts of information at a lightning-fast speed. He had a panoramic view of everything captured by his vision, and he could analyze and calculate every detail with incredible accuracy. His brain worked tirelessly, step by step, to make the most precise and advantageous judgments possible. The route of the jeep, the trajectory of the bullet, the wind speed. It seemed as if everything had become traceable. Without taking any long or serious aim, only following his breathing, Derek instinctively raised his pistol and shot. The curving bullets were shot out of the muzzle of the gun, captured by Derek's visual dynamics. The bullet pulled out a long and curvy trajectory through the air, and crashed straight into another bullet that was coming towards the motorcycle. Bang! Unbiased, the two bullets collided in mid-air with a resounding crack, as if they were lovers engaged in a passionate embrace. The collision was brief, but intense. Under the intense kinetic energy, the warhead underwent a process of rapid compression until it finally transformed into a flat, small disc-like object that fell to the ground. The transformation was swift, as the energy released by the collision had completely altered the structural properties of the warhead. Shooting one bullet to intercept another, the words exploded out of Frank's mouth, barely containing his excitement. The idea was audacious, impossible, and yet intriguing even for someone like Frank. Although Frank didn't have Derek's abnormal vision, he could still see some blurred images. Frank's Marine training had taught him to always be on the lookout for anything out of the ordinary, and this collision of two bullets in mid-air was certainly not something that he had encountered before. As he surveyed the scene, his mind working through the possibilities, he knew that this was no mere coincidence. The probability of such an event occurring was astronomically low, and even someone as skillful as Frank was not confident if he could do it. No, this wasn't a mere fluke, but his own skill. This isn't a skill that a human can achieve. With his own marksmanship, what is this kid? Derek was unaware of the thought in Frank's mind and the disbelief in his heart. At the moment, Derek, who was in bullet time, could control the motorcycle even better. He rode the motorcycle with one hand and used the other hand to shoot again towards his rear. Bang! The bullet was ejected, and following the planned path, it hit the front wheel of a Jeep with incomparable precision. The Jeep, which was driving at high speed, spun violently on the road. Amidst the screeching sound of the tires, the car lost control and crashed into another Jeep. The implicated Jeep couldn't escape in time. The car was knocked out of the driveway, and the front of the car plunged into the fire hydrant on the side of the street. Under the action of its strong inertia, the driver was thrown out of the car from the windshield, flying more than 10 meters into the air, and finally falling to the ground with his head down. Derek pouted. He was driving without even wearing a seatbelt. Is he in a rush to reincarnate? Derek reduced the number of jeeps chasing them down to 4 within moments for people out of the bullet time. The man who had spoken to Vladimir earlier was sitting in one of the jeeps. Seeing Derek's sudden display of marksmanship, the man's face got extremely ugly as he shouted, "Slow down, don't get shot by that guy. Let a people intercept them at the intersection in front." Soon, the jeep slowed down and created a distance from the motorcycle. "There's an ambush ahead." Frank sensed their intentions and informed Derek about it. Whether it is driving skills or marksmanship, Derek's performance far exceeded Frank's expectations. Frank's words didn't make Derek feel even the slightest bit of nervousness. If it weren't for the relatively low-end mobile phones of the era, Derek would have played a song on the spot to add to the fun. The motorcycle sped all the way to the intersection. As expected, the gangsters had already blocked the intersection. 6 vehicles were blocking the middle of the road. "What's our plan?" Frank asked aloud. "Room over them." This plan sounds very plausible at the moment. Frank did not stop Derek from making this crazy-sounding decision. Faced with such a situation, even in his heyday, he would not stay here. Seeing that the intersection was getting closer and closer, Derek's pupils dilated once again, and an excited smile appeared on his face. His heart was still beating violently, and the blood was continuously being pumped. Derek's skin was reddened to the naked eye. Frank in the back seat could feel heat radiating from Derek's whole body. His body was crazily secreting adrenaline. His brain was functioning rapidly, everyone's position was clearly constructed on a map in his mind, and all the surrounding details were processed, and finally, the safest and best plan was obtained. "Sit tight, I'm going to start seriously now." Chapter 25. Suddenly, without warning, Derek released his tight grip on the handlebars of the motorcycle. With lightning-fast speed, he whipped out his pistol and began to swing his arms and wrists in a wide arc, repeatedly pulling the trigger as he did so. The sharp crack of gunfire pierced the air, echoing off the surrounding buildings, and filling the street with a deafening roar once again. As the motorcycle roared forward beneath him, Derek's eyes blazed with a fierce determination. His every movement was calculated and precise. Bang bang. 2 gunshots sounded at very small intervals, as if they were shot at the same time. The muzzle released a lot of gunpowder smoke as the bullets sprayed out from the barrel one after another, stirring up white sound lines. With the high-speed rotation of the bullets, the original straight trajectory of the 2 bullets gradually deviated. They drew an exaggerated arc mid-air and dodged the car's solid body, entered the throat of a man, and then came out from behind his neck. With undiminished momentum, the bullet penetrated the heart of the man sitting beside him. Along with the sound of the 2 bullets entering the flesh, 4 men fell to the ground at almost the same time. The gangsters stood there frozen, their eyes fixed on the lifeless body before them, their faces etched with shock and disbelief, as if they had just witnessed the impossible. Where did the bullet come from? They hid behind the bunker cars, as it was impossible for the bullet to hit their position while they were behind the cars. Still, they had just seen their 4 men die after the bullet made a weird arc. Too many doubts still lingered in the minds of the gangsters, but Derek didn't give them time to think. The pistol fired out more bullets in an instant, taking several more lives. "Come on, fire." Such an illogical scene made the gangsters panic. They roared, held the automatic rifles with trembling hands, and began to rain bullets at Derek. Derek didn't have the slightest intention to stop the motorcycle. He nimbly shuttled the motorcycle between the hail of bullets, as if they were nothing more than some small pebbles coming under his way. With the assistance of bullet time, Derek deftly maneuvered the motorcycle, weaving through the hail of bullets with precision. The bullets whizzed by at a hair's breadth, while any that couldn't be avoided was intercepted by Derek in mid-air. In the eyes of the gangsters, the bullets seemed to be deliberately avoiding the motorcycles. Even with so many rifles firing at the same time, none of the bullets could hit the target successfully. The sound of gunshots intensified, becoming a frantic cacophony of noise. In the fierce gunshots from time to time, there were crisp and sharp bullet collision sounds. The moment the last bullet escaped from the barrel of Derek's pistol, the magazine would slide out, and a new magazine was put in at the same time. The gunshots sounded almost seamlessly. The surge of adrenaline had greatly strengthened Derek's physical fitness, making the recoil of the pistol almost equal to zero, therefore not affecting Derek's precision at all. Frank, sitting in the back seat, stared wide-eyed at what happened in front of him. He saw Derek's movements more clearly than the gangsters. It seemed that every shot was the result of extreme precision, full of self-confidence and unbelievable marksmanship. Derek suppressed more than a dozen gangsters wielding rifles with a single pistol, and left Frank, who was in the Marine Corps, stunned. Monster, he is a monster. Seeing their companions fall one after another and the motorcycle getting closer and closer to them, the remaining gangsters got terrified. No matter how or what they shot, the motorcycle and the people sitting on them were still unscathed. Even while they were hiding behind the cars, those damned bullets could always find their exact location and take away the lives of their companions with every bullet. It was a one-shot, one-kill. Every time a companion falls, it would leave huge amounts of haze in their hearts. This feeling was like a knife to their necks, along with the constant threat of death, completely crushing their willpower. The gangsters have long forgotten about the orders to catch them. They squeezed the trigger tightly with their fingers and shot ferociously at Derek, just hoping that one bullet could hit this monster. At that moment, the motorcycle was less than 20 meters away from the intersection. The originally scattered range of bullets gradually became denser and almost covered the whole road ahead of the motorcycle. Derek didn't panic and seemingly casually raised his hand and shot to the right. Boom. Suddenly, the billboard of the street shot fell to the ground, making a loud noise. The billboard just fell on the trash can on the side of the street, making a perfect slope. The motorcycle rushed forward with a dull roar. The tires grabbed the billboard tightly, and with a strong inertial force, it suddenly flew into the air, flying over the heads of all the gangsters. Derek pulled the trigger with his fingers continuously while in the air. Several bullets came out of the chamber, hitting the gangsters' bodies in a strange C-shape from high to low. Before the motorcycle landed back, all the bullets in the magazine had been fired. Boom. The motorcycle landed on the ground and let out a low growl, as the gangsters behind all fell to the ground at the same time. Now, there was no obstruction from the gangs. The motorcycle continued to run and soon disappeared from everyone's sight. This seemingly chapters-long shootout actually took only a few minutes. 4 jeeps that were chasing Derek previously arrived on the scene later as the remaining gangsters got out of them. There was dead silence in the street. Death and silence. The strong smell of gunpowder smoke still lingered in the air. The gangsters looked at the massacred corpses lying all over the ground. Cold sweat rolled down their faces, and some even trembled uncontrollably. Everyone's heart felt a little scared. So many armed men stood there, but they were all wiped out by only 2 people. This is the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day. Cecil and Trupter out.